stoic dwarves of Ironforge spent countless generations mining treasures from deep within the earth. Hidden within their impregnable stronghold of Ironforge Mountain, they rarely ventured beyond the wintry peaks of Dulmora. Recently, however, the dwarves unearthed a series of ruins that held secrets to their ancient heritage. Driven to discover the truth about his people's fabled origins, the great king Magni Bronzebeard ordered that the dwarves shift their industry from mining to archaeology. As part of the Grand Alliance, the stalwart dwarven armies have been called away to battle the merciless horde in faraway lands. In these perilous times, the defense of the Mountain Kingdom falls to brave dwarves like you. The spirits of the ancient kings watch over you, and the very mountains are your strength. The future of your people is in your hands.
Prologue. Angus Bjornsson closed his eyes as he lay supine on the iron dust-filled floor of his old smithy, forcing himself to face the truth of his situation. He had fallen, and he couldn't get up. He had to be thankful, all things considered. The crucible next to him had spilled its contents a few mere inches from his body. Otherwise it would have seared flesh from bone. Ain't no coming back from that, he thought. Still, he hated being this way. He hated the unresponsive fingers which refused to hold the crucible. He hated the weak arms that couldn't pick him up. He hated the weak legs which refused to do as he told them. He sighed, forcing himself not to feel self-pity, but admitting that, more than anything, he hated being old. No, he amended, that's not it. He could cope with being old. Sleeping more, feeling weak, having stomach aches if he ate something bad, shitting into a diaper. All of those things, well, he could get used to them, eventually. What he could not, would not get used to, was being unable to be useful. Worse, he was unable to keep performing his passion, as demonstrated by the molten iron now cooling next to him. Angus chuckled. He found it funny that he worried more about the botched material, and delayed commission, than the fact that he nearly died. The metal, now useless, was meant to become the blade and tang of a historically accurate 17th century-styled tapering longsword, a request made days ago to his smithy, Bjornsson Arms and Armor. Despite being a relatively simple piece, as it required no intricate engravings, no hand-chiseled quillions, no pattern or inlay, he had failed. He had failed in its making not because he didn't know the process to smelt iron and coal into steel, or because he didn't know the means to construct the weapon, both processes now second nature to him. No, the truth was much worse. He had failed because he was old, and currently, alone. His children, Jonas and Amelia, had inherited the smithy, and though they too enjoyed the process of weaponsmithing, being as adept or even better than he was, it wasn't their life's passion. He had told them, by God he had told them, that the sword needed to be completed as soon as possible. It was a simple piece, damn it. Many people would have called it plain. But then again, many people wouldn't have appreciated the subtle build, the elegant, functional tapering shape of the weapon. And his children? Well, they were off, of all things, shopping. Thus why he decided he could make the sword himself.
Are you the kind of person who knows things? Things like you can get a domain from Squarespace, not just a...
Once in deep sky, Captain Botherell worked the human slaves, the crew, and himself to the point of exhaustion until the ship was, he believed, safely beyond possible pursuit. Hours later, when the Lords of Night had cast their cloak over the sun, the captain found time to speak to his guests. So, you've heard the news, were the captain's first words, addressed to Hugh. I want you to know that I could have made a nice profit off the lot of you, but I have a debt to repay to you. I consider at least part of it cancelled. Where's my tobacco? Hugh demanded. What news? Asked Alfred. The captain raised an eyebrow. Don't you know? I assumed that was the reason you didn't leave the ship. He tossed a pouch in the assassin's direction. Hugh caught it handily, opened it, and sniffed. Removing his pipe, he began filling it. There's a reward out for your head, Hugh the Hand. Hugh grunted. Nothing new. A total of 200,000 barrels. The Hand looked up and whistled. Now, that's a fine price. This has to do with the kid. His glance shifted to Bane. The child had begged pen and paper from the elves and had done nothing but draw ever since he came on board. No one interfered with his latest amusement. It was safer than letting him pick berries. Yes, you and this man, the elf gestured at Alfred, are reported to have kidnapped the Prince of Volcaran. There is a price of 100,000 barrels on your head, he said to the horrified Chamberlain. 200,000 for Hugh the Hand, and the reward is good only if one or both are brought in alive. What about me? Bane raised his head. Isn't there any reward for me? Stephen doesn't want you back, Hugh growled. The prince appeared to consider this, then giggled. Yes, I guess you're right, he said, and returned to his work. But this is impossible, cried Alfred. I am His Highness's servant. I came with him to protect him. Exactly, said Hugh. That's just what Stephen didn't want. I don't understand any of this, said Captain Baltharell. I hope for your sakes you are being honest about the High Realm. I need money to run this ship and pay my crew, and I've just passed up a lot. Of course it's true, cried Bane, lower lip thrust forward in a charming pout. I am the son of Sinistrad, Mysteriarch of the 7th House. My father will reward you well. He had better, said the captain. The elf glanced around sternly at his prisoner, then stalked out of the hold. Bane, looking after him, laughed and returned to his scribbling. I can never go back to Volcaran, murmured Alfred. I'm an exile. You're dead unless we can figure some way out of this, said Hugh, lighting his pipe with a coal from the small mage pot they used to heat their food and to keep themselves warm at night. Footnote, mage pot, an iron pot that holds magical glowstones used for light and heat. End of footnote. But Stephen wants us alive. Only so that he can have the pleasure of killing us himself. Bane, looking up at him, smiled slyly. So if you had gone out there, someone would have recognized you and turned you in. You stayed because of me, didn't you? I saved your life. Hugh made no comment, preferring to pretend that he hadn't heard. He relapsed into a brooding, thoughtful silence. When his pipe went out, he didn't notice. Coming back to himself sometime later, he noted that everyone, except Alfred, had fallen asleep. The Chamberlain was standing beside the porthole, gazing out into night's gray gloom. The Hand, rising to stretch his stiff legs, wandered over. What do you make of this fellow Haplo? Hugh asked. Why? Alfred jumped, stared at the assassin fearfully. Why do you ask? No reason. Calm down. I just wanted to know what you made of him, that's all. Nothing. I make nothing of him at all. If you will excuse me, sir. Alfred interrupted when Hugh would have spoken. I'm very tired. I must get some sleep. Now, what was that all about? The Chamberlain returned to his blanket. He lay down, but Hugh, watching him, saw that Alfred was far from asleep. He lay stiff and rigid, rubbing his hands, tracing unseen lines upon the skin. His face could have been a mask in a play called Terror and Misery. Hugh could almost pity him. Almost, but not quite. No, the walls Hugh built around himself were still standing, still strong and unbroken. There had been a tiny crack, letting in a ray of light, harsh and painful to eyes accustomed to darkness. But he'd blocked it up, covered it over. Whatever hold the child had on him was magic, something beyond the assassin's control, at least until they came to the High Realm. Retreating to a corner of his cell, Hugh relaxed and went to sleep. The flight to the High Realm took the elven dragon ship almost 2 weeks, far longer than it should have, according to Captain Botharell's calculations. What he hadn't calculated on was that his crew and slaves all tired far too quickly. Magical spells cast by the ship's wizard enabled them to withstand the reduced air pressure, but he could do nothing to relieve the thinness of the air that left them always feeling as if they were short of breath. The elven crew grew nervous, sullen, and uneasy. It was eerie flying through the vast and empty sky. Above them, the firmament glittered and sparkled brightly by day, glistened with a pale sheen at night. Even the most gullible person aboard could see that the mysterious firmament was not made of jewels floating in the heavens. Chunks of ice, announced Captain Botharell, studying it through the spyglass. Ice? The second-in-command appeared almost relieved. That's stopped us then, hasn't it, Captain, sir? We can't fly through ice. We might as well turn back. No, Botharell snapped his spyglass shut. It seemed he was answering himself, replying to some inner argument rather than to the words of his mate. "We've come this far. The high realm is up here somewhere. We're going to find it." "Or die trying," said the second in command, but he said it to himself. On they sailed, higher and higher, drawing nearer the firmament that hung spanning the sky like a monstrous radiant necklace. They saw no sign of life of any type, let alone a land where dwelt the most highly skilled of human magi. The air grew colder. They were forced to wear every article of clothing they possessed, and even then it was difficult to keep warm. The crew began to mutter among themselves that this was mad folly. They would all perish up here, either of the cold or stranded in deep sky, lacking the strength to fly back. After days passed with no sign of life, supplies running short and the cold growing almost unbearable, Captain Botherell went below to tell the guests he had changed his mind. They were returning to the mid-realm. He found the prisoners wrapped in every blanket they could get their hands on, huddled over the mage pot. The gig was deathly ill, either from the cold or the change in air pressure. The captain didn't know what kept him alive. Alfred did, but took care no one should ask him. Botherell was just about to make his announcement when a shout hailed him. "What is it?" The captain ran back to the bridge. "Have we found it?" "I'd say, sir," said a stammering midshipman, staring with wide eyes out the porthole, "that it's found us." Chapter 44. Castle Sinister, High Realm. Irodol stood at the casement, gazing up the crystal window. The beauty of the sight before her was incomparable. The opal walls of her castle glistened in the sunlight, adding to the shimmering colors of the magical dome that was the High Realm's sky. Below the walls, the castle's parks and forests, carefully sculptured and tended, were traversed by pathways whose crushed marble was pricked by glittering gems. Its beauty could stop the heart, but it was long since Irodol had seen beauty in anything. Her name itself, meaning "of the rainbow," mocked her. All in her world was gray. As for her heart, it seemed to have stopped beating a long time ago. "Wife," the voice came from behind her. Irodol shivered. She had supposed she was alone in her room. She had not heard the silent padding of slippered feet or the rustling of silken robes that invariably announced the presence of her husband. He had not entered her room for many years, and she felt the chill of his presence grip her heart and squeeze it tightly. Fearfully, she turned around and faced him. "What do you want?" Her hand clutched her gown tightly around her, as if the frail fabric might armor her against him. "Why do you come here to my private quarters?" Sinistrad glanced at the bed with its flowing curtains and tasseled hangings, its silken sheets smelling faintly of the lavender leaves scattered on them every morning and carefully brushed away each night. "Since when is a husband forbidden his wife's bedchamber?" "Leave me alone." The chill in her heart seemed to have spread to her lips. She could barely move them. "Do not worry, wife. For 10 cycles I have not come here for the purpose you fear, and I do not intend to resume. Such doings are as repugnant to me as they are you. We might as well all be beasts, rotting in dark and stinking caves. However, it does bring me around to the subject I came to discuss. Our son is coming at last." "Our son?" Irodol cried. "Your son? He is none of mine." "Let us rejoice," said Sinistrad with a pale, dry smile. "I am glad you take this view of the matter, my dear. I trust you will remember it when the boy arrives, and that you will not interfere with our work." "What could I possibly do?" "Bitterness does not become you, wife. Remember, I know your tricks. Tears, pouting, little hugs for the child that you think I will not see. I warn you, Irodol, I will see. My eyes are everywhere, even in the back of my head. The boy is mine. You have pronounced it. Never forget it." "Tears. Don't fear my tears, husband. They dried up long ago." "Fear? I am not afraid of anything, least of all you, wife," returned Sinistrad with some amusement. "But you could be an annoyance, confuse the boy's mind. I don't have time to fool with you." "Why not just lock me up in the dungeon? I am already your prisoner in all but name." "I had considered it, but the boy would take an undue interest in a mother he is forbidden to see. No, it will be far better if you appear and smile prettily at him. Allow him to see that you are weak and spineless." "You want me to teach him to despise me?" Sinistrad shrugged. "I do not aspire to that much, my dear. It will be far better for my plans if he thinks nothing of you at all. And, by good fortune, we have something that will ensure your proper behavior. Hostages. 3 humans and a gig on his traveling companions. How important it must make you feel, Iridol, to know that you hold so many lives in your hands. The woman's face went livid. Her knees gave way and she sank into a chair. You have sunk low, Sinistrad, but you have never committed murder. I don't believe your threat. Let us rephrase that statement, wife. You have never known me to commit murder. But then, let us both admit that you have never known me, period. Good day to you, wife. I will give you notice when you are to appear to greet our son. Bowing, hand over his heart in the time-honored custom of husband and wife, turning even this gesture to one of disdain and mockery, Sinistrad left Iridol's chambers. Shivering uncontrollably, the woman crouched in her chair and stared out the window with dry, burning eyes. My father says you are an evil man. The girl, Iridol, gazed out of a window in her father's dwelling. Standing quite near her, almost touching her, but never coming that close, was a young Mysteriarch. He was the handsome, wicked hero of Iridol's nurse's romantic tales. Smooth, pallid skin, liquid brown eyes that always seemed to be the repository of fascinating secrets. A smile that promised to share these secrets if someone could only draw close enough to him. The black, gilt-edged skull cap that marked his standing as a master of discipline of the 7th house, the highest rank attainable by wizards, dipped to a sharp point that came to the bridge of his thin nose. Sweeping upward between the eyes, the cap gave him an appearance of wisdom and added expression to his face that might otherwise be lacking. He had no eyebrows or eyelashes. His entire body was hairless, a defect of birth. Your father is right, Iridol, said Sinistrad softly. Reaching out his hand, he toyed with a strand of her hair, the nearest move to intimacy he ever made. I am evil. I do not deny it. There was a touch of melancholy in his voice that melted Iridol's heart as his touch melted her flesh. Turning to face him, she held out her hands, clasped his, and smiled at him. No, beloved. The world may call you that, but it is because they don't know you, not as I know you. But I am, Iridol. His voice was gentle and in earnest. I tell you the truth now because I don't want you to reproach me with it later. Marry me and you marry darkness. His finger wound the strand of hair tighter and tighter, drawing her nearer and nearer. His words and the serious tone in which he spoke them made her heart falter painfully. But the pain was sweet and exciting. The darkness that hung over him, dark rumors, dark words spoken about him among the community of Mysteriarchs, was exciting too. Her life, all its 16 years, had been dull and prosaic. Living with a father who doted on her following her mother's death, Iridol had been raised by a grandmotherly nanny. Her father could not bear life's rough winds to blow too harshly against his daughter's tender cheek, and he had kept her sheltered and cloistered, wrapped in a smothering cocoon of love. The butterfly that emerged from that cocoon was bright and shining. Its feeble wings carried it straight into Sinistrad's web. If you are evil, she said, twining her hands around his arm, it is the world that has made you so, by refusing to listen to your plans and thwarting your genius at every turn. When I am walking by your side, I will bring you to the sunlight. Then you will be my wife. You will go against your father's wishes. I am of age. I can make my own choice. And, beloved, I choose you. Sinistrad said nothing, but, smiling his secret, promising smile, he kissed the strand of hair wound tightly around his finger. Iridol lay in her bed, weak from the travails of birth. Her nurse had finished bathing the tiny infant, and wrapping him in a blanket, carried him to his mother. The occasion should have been one of joy, but the old nurse, who had been Iridol's own, wept when she laid the child in his mother's arms. The door to the bedchamber opened. Iridol made a low moaning sound and clutched the baby so tightly he squalled. The nurse, looking up, smoothed back the woman's sweat-damp curls with gentle hands. A look of defiance hardened the wrinkled face. Leave us, said Sinistrad, speaking to the nurse, his gaze fixed upon his wife. I will not leave my lamb. The eyes of the Mysteriarch shifted. The nurse held her ground, though the hand touching Iridol's fair hair trembled. Grabbing hold of the nurse's fingers, Iridol kissed them and bade her leave in a low and tremulous voice. I cannot, child. The nurse began to weep. It's cruel what he means to do, cruel and unnatural. Get out, Sinistrad snarled, or I will burn you to ashes where you stand. The nurse cast him a look of malice, but she withdrew from the room. She knew who would suffer if she did not. Now that this is over, she must go, wife, said Sinistrad, coming to stand beside the bed. I will not be defied in my own house. Please, no, husband. She is the only company I have. Iridol's arms clung to her baby. She looked up at her husband pleadingly, one hand plucking at the blanket. And I will need her help with our son. See. She drew the blanket aside, exhibiting a red, wrinkled face, eyes squinched shut, small fists bunched tightly together. Isn't he beautiful, husband? She hoped desperately, despairingly, that a glimpse of his own flesh and blood would change his mind. He suits my purpose, said Sinistrad, reaching out his hands. No, Iridol shrank away from him. Not my child, please don't. I told you my intentions the day you announced your pregnancy. I told you then that I had married you for this purpose and this alone, that I had bedded you for the same reason and no other. Give me the child. Iridol huddled over her baby, her head bowed, her long hair covering the boy in a shining curtain. She refused to look at her husband, as if looking at him gave him power. By shutting her eyes to him, she might make him vanish. But it didn't work, because with her eyes closed, she saw him as he had been that terrible day when her bright illusions of love were completely and irrevocably shattered. The day she had told him her joyous news that she carried his child within her. That day he had told her in cold and passionless tones what he intended to do with the babe. Iridol should have known he was plotting something. She did know, but wouldn't admit it. On her bridal night, her life had changed from rainbow dreams to gray emptiness. His lovemaking was without love, without passion. He was brisk, businesslike, keeping his eyes open, staring at her intently, willing her to something that she could not understand. Night after night he came to her. During the day he rarely saw her, rarely spoke to her. She grew to dread the night visits and had once ventured to refuse him, begging that he treat her with love. He had taken her that night with violence and pain, and she had never dared refuse him again. Perhaps that very night their child had been conceived. A month later she knew she was pregnant. From the day she told him, Sinistrad never came to her bedroom again. The child in her arms wailed. Strong hands grabbed Iridol by the hair and jerked her head back. Strong hands wrenched her child from her grasp. Pleading, the mother crawled from her bed and stumbled after her husband as he walked away, their crying infant in his arms. But she was too weak. Tangled in the blood-stained bedclothes, Iridol fell to the floor. One hand caught hold of his robes, dragging him back. My baby, don't take my baby. He regarded her coldly with disgust. I told you the day I asked you to be my wife what I was. I have never lied to you. You chose not to believe me, and that is your own fault. You have brought this upon yourself. Reaching down, he grasped the fabric of his robe and jerked it from her feeble, clutching fingers. Turning, he left the room. When he came back later that night, he brought another baby. The true child born to the wretched king and queen of Volcaran and Eulandia. Sinistrad handed it to Iridol as one might hand over a puppy found abandoned on the road. I want my son, she cried, not the child of some other poor woman. Do what you like with it, then, said Sinistrad. His plan had worked well. He was almost in a good humor. Suckle it, drown it, I don't care. Iridol took pity on the tiny baby, and hoping that the love she lavished on it would be reciprocated on her child so far away, she nursed him tenderly. But the infant could not adapt to the rarefied atmosphere. He died within days, and something within Iridol died too. Going to Sinistrad a month later in his laboratory, she told him calmly and quietly that she was leaving, returning to the house of her father. In reality, her plan was to go to the Mid-Realm and take back her child. No, my dear, I think not, replied Sinistrad, without looking up from the text he was perusing. My marriage to you lifted the dark cloud from me. The others trust me now. If our plans to escape this realm are to succeed, I'll need the help of all in our community. They must do my will without question. I cannot afford the scandal of a separation from you. He looked up at her then, and she saw that he knew her plans. He knew the secrets of her heart. You can't stop me, Iridol cried. The mysteries I weave are powerful, but I am skilled in magic, as skilled as you, husband, who have devoted your life to your overweening ambition. I will proclaim your evil to the world. They will not follow you, but rise up and destroy you. You're right, my dear. I cannot stop you. But perhaps you'd like to discuss this with your father. Keeping a finger on his place in the book, Sinistrad raised his head and made a gesture with his hand. A box of ebony drifted up from the table on which it stood, floated through the air, and came to rest near the wizard's book. Opening it with one hand, he lifted out a silver locket hanging from a rope of black velvet. He held out the locket to Iridol. What is it? She stared at it suspiciously. A gift, my dear, from loving husband to loving wife. His smile was a knife twisting in her heart. Open it. Iridol took the locket with fingers so numb and cold she nearly dropped it. Inside was a portrait of her father. Take care that you do not drop it or break it, said Sinistrad casually, returning to his reading. Iridol saw in horror that the portrait was staring back at her, its trapped, living eyes pitying, helpless. Sounds outside the window roused Iridol from her melancholy reverie. Rising weakly and unsteadily from the chair, she stared out the casement. Sinistrad's dragon was floating through the clouds, its tail cutting the mist to wispy shreds that trailed away and vanished, like dreams, thought Iridol. The Quicksilver dragon had come at Sinistrad's command, and now circled round and round the castle, awaiting its master. The beast was huge, with shining silver skin, a sinuous thin body, and flaring red eyes. It had no wings, but could fly faster without them than could its winged cousins of the mid-realm. Nervous and unpredictable, the most intelligent of their kind, these Quicksilver dragons, as they were known, could be controlled only by the most powerful wizards. Even then, the dragon knew it was enthralled and constantly fought a mental battle with the spellcaster, forcing the magus who enchanted it to be continually on his guard. Iridol watched it out the window. The dragon was always moving, one moment twisting itself into a gigantic coil, rearing its head higher than the tallest castle tower, the next unwinding itself with lightning speed to wrap its long body around the castle's mist-shrouded base. Once Iridol had feared the Quicksilver. If it slipped its magical leash, it would kill them all. Now she no longer cared. Sinistrad appeared, and Iridol involuntarily drew back away from the window so that he would not see her if he happened to glance up. He did not look up at her chamber, however, being far more concerned with more important matters. The elven ship had been sighted, the ship carrying his son. He and the others in the council must meet to make final plans and preparations. This was why he was taking the dragon. As a mysteriarch of the 7th house, Sinistrad could have transported himself mentally to the guild hall, dissolving his body and reforming it when the mind arrived at its destination. That had been his means of entry into the mid-realm. Such a feat was taxing, however, and really impressive only if someone was there to see the wizard materialize, supposedly out of thin air. Elves were much more likely to be terrified by the sight of a gigantic dragon than by the refined and delicate techniques of mental spell-casting. Sinistrad mounted the Quicksilver, which he had named Gorgon, and it soared into the air and out of Iridol's sight. Her husband had not once looked back. Why should he? He had no fear that she would escape him, not anymore. There were no guards posted round the castle. There were no servants posted to watch her and report her doings to their master. He had no need of any, could any have been found. Iridol was her own guard, locked up by her shame, held captive by her terror. Her hand clasped round the locket. The portrait inside was alive no longer. Her father had died some years ago. His soul trapped by Sinistrad, the body had withered away. But whenever Iridol looked at the image of her father's face, she could still see the pity in his eyes. The castle was silent, empty, nearly as silent and empty as her heart. She must dress, she told herself drearily, taking off the night clothes that she wore almost all the time now. The only escape she had was in sleep. Turning from the window, she saw herself in a mirror opposite. 26 cycles. She looked as if she had lived 100. Her hair, that had once been the color of strawberries dipped in golden honey, was now white as the clouds drifting past her window. Lifting a brush, she began to listlessly make some attempt to untangle the matted tresses. Her son was coming. She must make a good impression. Otherwise, Sinistrad would be displeased. Chapter 45. New Hope, High Realm. Swift as its name, the Quicksilver Dragon bore Sinistrad to New Hope, the capital city of the High Realm. The Mysteriarch was fond of using the dragon to impress his own people. No other wizard had been able to exert a hold over the highly intelligent and dangerous Quicksilver. It would not hurt in this critical time to remind the others once again why they had chosen him to be their leader. Sinistrad arrived in New Hope to find that the magic had already been cast. Shining crystal, towering spires, tree-lined boulevards. He barely recognized the place. Two fellow Mysteriarchs standing outside the council chamber were looking extremely proud of themselves, also extremely fatigued. Dipping down from the sky, Sinistrad gave them time to fully appreciate his mount. Then he released it, ordering the creature to remain within call and await his summons. The dragon opened its fanged mouth in a gaping snarl. Its red eyes flamed with hatred. Sinistrad turned his back on the creature. I tell you, Sinistrad, someday that dragon's going to break free of the spell you've cast over him, and then none of us will be safe. It was a mistake to capture it, said one of the wizards, an aged Mysteriarch, eyeing the Quicksilver askance. Have you so little faith in my power? Inquired Sinistrad in a mild voice. The Mysteriarch said nothing, but glanced at his companion. Noting the look pass between them, Sinistrad guessed correctly that they had been discussing him before he came. What is it? He demanded. Let us be honest with each other. I have always insisted on that, you know. Yes, we know. You rub our noses in your honesty, said the old man. Come, Balthazar, you know me for what I am. You knew what I was when you voted me your leader. You knew I was ruthless, that I would allow nothing to stand in my way. Some of you called me evil then. You call me that now, and it is an appellation I do not deny. Yet I was the only one among you with vision. I was the one who devised the plan to save our people. Isn't that so? The Mysteriarchs looked at Sinistrad, glanced at each other, then looked away. One turning his gaze on the beautiful city, the other watching the quicksilver dragon vanish into the cloudless sky. Yes, we agree, said one. We had no choice, added the other. Not very complimentary, but then I can do without compliments. Speaking of which, the work you have done is excellent. Sinistrad gave the spires, the boulevards, the trees a critical inspection. Reaching out his hand, he touched the stone of the building before which they were standing. So good, in fact, I was forced to wonder if this wasn't all part of it as well. I was half afraid to enter. One of the Mysteriarchs smiled bleakly at the wizard's little essay into humor. The other, the old man, scowled, turned, and left him. Gathering his robes about him, Sinistrad followed his companions, ascending the marble stairs and passing through the glittering crystal doors of the Wizard's Guild Hall. Inside the hall, talking in solemn and hushed voices, were gathered about 50 wizards. Male and female, they were clad in robes similar to Sinistrad's in make and design, although widely varying in color. Each hue designated a wizard's particular devotion: green for the land, deep blue for the sky, red for fire, or magic of the mind, light blue for water. A few, such as Sinistrad, wore the black that stood for discipline. Iron discipline, the discipline that admitted no weakness. When he strode into the room, those present who had been conversing together in low, excited voices fell silent. Each bowed and stepped aside, forming an opening in their ranks through which he walked. Glancing about him, nodding to friends here, noting enemies there, Sinistrad moved without haste through the large hall. Made of marble, the guild hall was bleak, empty, and unadorned. No tapestries graced its walls, no statues decorated its doorways. No windows admitted the sunlight, no magic dispelled the gloom. The dwellings of the Mysteriarchs in the mid-realm had been renowned throughout the world as the most marvelous of all human creations. Remembering the beauty from which they had come, the wizards found the starkness and austerity of the guild hall in the high realm chilling. Hands thrust into the sleeves of their robes, they stood well away from the walls and appeared to try to avoid looking anywhere except at each other or their leader, Sinistrad. He was the youngest among them. Every Mysteriarch there could remember him first entering the guild hall, a well-built youth inclined to be servile and sniveling. His parents had been among the earliest of the exiles to succumb up here, leaving him orphaned. The others felt sorry for the young man, but not unduly. There were, after all, many orphans at that time. Immersed in their own problems, which were monumental, no one had paid much attention to the young wizard. Human wizards had their own version of history that was, much like any other race's history, distorted by their own perspective. Following the Sundering, the Sartan had brought the people, not first to Aristogon, as the elves would have it, but here, to this realm beneath a magical dome. The humans, particularly the wizards, worked extremely hard to make this realm not only habitable but beautiful. It seemed to them that the Sartan were never around to help, but were always off somewhere on important business. On the infrequent occasions when the Sartan returned, they lent their assistance utilizing their rune magic. Thus it was that fabulous buildings were created, the dome was strengthened, the coralite bore fruit, water was in abundance. The human wizards were not particularly grateful, they were envious, they coveted the rune magic. Then came the day when the Sartan announced the mid-realm below was suitable for habitation. Humans and elves were transported to Aristogon, while the Sartan remained above in the high realm. The Sartan gave the reason for the move, the fact that the domed land was getting too crowded. The human wizards believed that the Sartan had cast them out because the wizards were becoming too knowledgeable about the rune magic. Time passed, and the elves grew strong and united under their powerful wizards, and the humans turned into barbaric pirates. The human wizards watched the rise of the elves with outward disdain and inward fear. They said to themselves, if only we had the rune magic, then we could destroy the elves. Instead of helping their own people, therefore, they began to concentrate their magic on finding ways to return to the high realm. At length, they succeeded, and a large force of the most powerful magi, the Mysteriarchs, ascended to the high realm to challenge the Sartan and take back what they had come to see as rightfully their land. This the humans called the War of Ascension, only it wasn't much of a war. The Mysteriarchs woke one morning to find the Sartan gone, their dwellings empty, their cities abandoned. The wizards returned victorious to their people, only to find the mid-realm in chaos, torn by war. It was all they could do to manage to stay alive, much less try to use their magic to move the people to the promised land. Finally, after years of suffering and hardship, the Mysteriarchs were able to leave the Mid-Realm and enter the land their legends held was beautiful, bountiful, safe, and secure. Here, too, they hoped to discover at last the secrets of the runes. It all seemed a wonderful dream. It would soon turn to a nightmare. End of Side 8. Change side selector switch. This book is continued on the next cassette. The runes kept their secrets, and the Mysteriarchs discovered to their horror how much of the beauty and bounty of the land had depended on the runes. Crops grew, but not in the numbers needed to feed the people. Famine swept the land. Water was scarce and became scarcer, each family having to expend immense amounts of magic in order to produce it. Centuries of inbreeding had already weakened the wizards, and further inbreeding in this closed realm produced frightful genetic defects that could not be cured with magic. These children died, and eventually few children were born. Most horrifying, it became obvious to the Mysteriarchs that the magic of the dome was fading. They would have to leave this realm, yet how could they, without proclaiming their failure, their weaknesses? One man had an idea. One man told them how it could be done. They were desperate. They listened. As time passed and Sinistrad did well in his magical studies, surpassing many of the elders in his power, he ceased to be servile and began to flaunt his abilities. His elders were displeased and disgusted when he changed his name to Sinistrad, but they thought little of it at the time. Back in the Mid-Realm, a bully might call himself Brute or Thug or some other tough-sounding name in order to garner respect he hadn't earned. It meant nothing. The Mysteriarchs had ignored the name change, just as they had ignored Sinistrad. Oh, a few spoke out, Iridal's father being one of them. A few tried to make their fellows see the young man's overweening ambition, his ruthless cruelty, his ability to manipulate. Those who spoke the warnings were not heeded. Iridal's father lost his only loved daughter to the man, and lost his life in Sinistrad's magical captivity. None of the wizards knew that, however. The prison had been created so skillfully that no one ever noticed. The old wizard walked about the land, visited his friends, performed his duties. If any remarked that he seemed listless and sorrowful, all knew he grieved over his daughter's marriage. None knew that the old man's soul had been held hostage like a bug in a glass jar. Imperceptibly, patiently, the young wizard cast his web over all the surviving wizards of the High Realm. The filaments were practically invisible, light to the touch, barely felt. He didn't weave a gigantic web for all to see, but deftly wrapped a line around an arm, wound a toil around a foot, holding them so lightly that they never knew they were held at all until the day came when they couldn't move. Now they were stuck fast, caught by their own desperation. Sinistrad was right. They had no choice. They had to rely on him, for he was the only one who had been smart enough to plan ahead and make some provision to escape their beautiful hell. Sinistrad arrived at the front of the hall. He caused a golden podium to spring up from the floor, and, mounting it, turned to address his fellows. The elf ship has been sighted. My son is aboard. In accordance with our plans, I shall go to meet and guide it. We never agreed to allow an elven vessel inside the dome, spoke out a female Mysteriarch. You said it would be a small ship piloted by your son and his oafish servant. I was forced to effect a change in plans, replied Sinistrad, his lips creasing in a thin and unpleasant smile. The first ship was attacked by elves and crashed on Drevlin. My son was able to take over this elven vessel. The child holds their captain in thrall. There are no more than 30 elves on board the ship and only one wizard, a very weak wizard, of course. I think we can deal with that situation, don't you? Yes, in the old days, answered a woman. One of us could have dealt with 30 elves, but now... Her voice trailed away as she shook her head. That is why we have worked our magic, created the illusions. Sinistrad gestured toward the outside of the guild hall. They will be intimidated by the sight alone. We will have no trouble from them. Why not meet them at the firmament? Take your son and let them go on their way, demanded the aged Mysteriarch known as Balthazar. Because, you doddering fool, we need their vessel, Sinistrad hissed, clearly growing angry at the questioning. With it, we can transport large numbers of our people back down to the Mid-Realm. Before, we would have been forced to wait until we could either acquire vessels or enchant more dragons. So what do we do with the elves? Asked the woman. Everyone looked to Sinistrad. They knew the answer as well as he did. They wanted to hear him say it. He said it without pause, without hesitation. We kill them. The silence was loud and echoing. The aged Mysteriarch shook his head. No, I won't be a party to this. Why not, Balthazar? You killed elves enough back in the Mid-Realm. That was war. This is murder. War is us or them. This is war. It is either us or them. The Mysteriarchs around him murmured, seeming to agree. Several began to argue with the old wizard, trying to persuade him to change his stance. Sinistrad is right, they said. It is war. It can never be anything else between our races. And, after all, Sinistrad's only trying to lead us home. I pity you, Balthazar snarled. I pity you all. He, pointing at Sinistrad, is leading you all right, leading you around by the nose like fatted calves. And when he's ready to dine, he'll slaughter the lot of you and feed off your flesh. Ah, leave me alone. I'll die up here sooner than follow him back there. The old wizard stalked toward the door. And so you will, Greybeard, muttered Sinistrad beneath his breath. Let him go, he said aloud when some of his fellows would have gone after the wizard, unless there are any others who want to leave with him. The Mysteriarch cast a swift, searching glance around the room, gathering up the tendrils of his web and tugging it tighter and tighter. No one else managed to break free. Those who had once struggled were now so weak with fear they were eager and ready to do his bidding. Very well. I will bring the elven ship through the dome. I will remove my son and his companions to my castle. Sinistrad might have told his people that one of his son's companions was a skilled assassin, a man who could take the blood of the elves on his own hands and leave those of the Mysteriarchs clean. But Sinistrad wanted to harden his people, force them to sink lower and lower until they would willingly and unquestioningly do anything he asked. Those of you who volunteered to learn to fly the elf ship know what you are to do. The rest must work to maintain the city's spells. When the time comes, I will give the signal and we will act. He gazed at them all, studied each pallid, grim face, and was satisfied. Our plans are progressing well, better than we had anticipated, in fact. Traveling with my son are several who may be of use to us in ways we had not foreseen. One is a dwarf from the Low Realm. The elves have exploited the dwarves for centuries. It is likely we can turn the Gigs, as they call themselves, to war. Another is a human who claims to come from a realm beneath the Low Realm, a realm none of us previously knew existed. This news could be extremely valuable to all of us. There were murmurs of approval and agreement. My son brings information about the human kingdoms and the Elven Revolution, all of which will be most helpful when we set about to conquer them. And most important, he has seen the great machine built by the Sartan on the Low Realm. At last we may be able to unravel the mystery of the so-called Kixie Whinsey and turn it, too, to our use. Sinistrad raised his hands in a blessing. Go forth now, my people. Go forth and know that as you do so, you are stepping out into the world, for soon Arianus will be ours. The meeting broke up with cheering, most of it enthusiastic. Sinistrad stepped down from the podium and it disappeared. Magic had to be carefully rationed, expended only on that which was essential. Then he stopped him to congratulate him or to ask questions, clearing up small details about the plan of action. Several asked politely after his health, but no one inquired about his wife. Irodol had not been present at a council meeting in 10 cycles, ever since the guild voted to go along with Sinistrad's plot to take her child and exchange it for the human prince. The guild members were just as well pleased Irodol did not attend the meetings. They still, after all this time, found it difficult to look into her eyes. Sinistrad, mindful of the need to commence his journey, shook off the hangers-on who crowded round him and made his way from the guild hall. A mental command brought the Quicksilver Dragon to the very foot of the stairs of the hall. Glowering at the wizard balefully, the dragon nevertheless suffered the Mysteriarch to mount its back and command it to do his bidding. The dragon had no choice but to obey Sinistrad. It was enthralled. In this, the creature was unlike the wizards standing in the shadowy doorway of the guild hall. They had given themselves to Sinistrad of their own free will. Chapter 46, The Firmament. The elven dragon ship hung motionless in the thin, chill air. Having reached the floating chunks of ice known as the firmament, it had come to a halt, no one daring to proceed further. Ice floes 10 times larger than the vessel loomed above them. Smaller boulders circled the more massive chunks. The air glistened with tiny droplets of frozen water. The sun's glare off the flowbergs dazzled the eye. No one could look at them directly without being blinded. How thick the firmament was, how far it reached, was anyone's guess. No one, except the Mysteriarchs and the Sartan, had ever flown this high and returned to give an account of their journey. Maps had been drawn from speculation, and now everyone on board ship knew them to be inaccurate. No one had guessed the Mysteriarchs had passed through the firmament to build their realm on the other side. Natural defense barrier, said Hugh, peering with narrowed eyes at the awful beauty outside the porthole. No wonder they've kept their wealth undisturbed all these years. How do we get through it? Asked Bane. The child was standing on tiptoe to see. We don't. But we have to, the prince's voice shrilled. I have to get to my father. Kid, one of the ice boulders, even a little one, hits us, and our bodies will be just another star twinkling in the daytime sky. Maybe you better tell Daddy to come get you. Bane's face smoothed. The flush of anger faded. Thank you for the suggestion, Sir Hugh. His hand clasped around the feather. I'll do just that. And I'll be certain to tell him all you've done for me. All of you. His glance encompassed everyone from Alfred to a beauty-dazed Limbeck to Haplo's dog. I'm certain he'll reward you, as you deserve. Skipping across the deck, Bane plunked himself down in a corner of the hold, and closing his eyes, apparently began to commune with his father. I didn't like that little pause he put in between reward and deserve, remarked Haplo. What's to keep this wizard from snatching his kid and sending us up in flames? Nothing, I suppose, answered Hugh, except that he wants something, and it's not just his little boy. Otherwise, why go to all this trouble? Sorry, you've lost me. Alfred, come here. Look, you said that this Sinistrad came to the castle at night, switched babies, and then left. How'd he manage that with guards all around? The Mysteriarchs have the power to transport themselves through the air. Tryon explained it thus to His Majesty the King. The spell is done by means of sending the mind on ahead of the body. Once the mind is firmly established in a particular location, it can call for the body to join it. The only requirement of the spellcaster is that he must have previously visited the place so that he can mentally call up an accurate picture of where he's going. The Mysteriarchs had often visited the royal palace on Newalandia, which is nearly as old as the world. But he couldn't, for example, send himself to the Low Realm or the Elven Palace on Aristagon. No, sir, he couldn't. Not mentally, at least. None of them could. The elves hated and feared the Mysteriarchs and never allowed them in their kingdom. The wizards couldn't travel to the Low Realm that way either, since they'd never been there before. They'd have to rely on other means of transport. Oh, I see your point, sir. Uh-huh. First, Sinistrad tried to get my ship. That failed, and now he has this one. If he... Hush, company, murmured Haplo. The door to the brig opened, and Captain Botharel, flanked by 2 crew members, entered. You, he pointed to Hugh, come with me. Shrugging, the hand did as he was told, not sorry to get a glimpse of what was going on above. The door slammed shut behind them, the guard locked it, and Hugh followed the elf up the ladder to the top deck. It was not until he arrived on the bridge that he noticed Haplo's dog trotting at his heels. Where did that come from? The captain glared at the animal irritably. The dog gazed up at him, brown eyes shining, tongue lolling, tail wagging. I don't know. He followed me, I guess. Midshipman, get that thing off the bridge, take it back to its master, and tell him to keep an eye on it, or I'll toss it overboard. Yes, sir. The midshipman bent down to pick up the dog. The animal's demeanor changed instantly. Its ears flattened, and the tail ceased wagging, and began a slow and ominous brush from side to side. The lips parted in a snarl, a low growl rumbled in the chest. If you are fond of those fingers, the animal seemed to say, you better keep them to yourself. The midshipman took the dog's advice. Putting his hands behind his back, he looked questioningly and fearfully at his captain. Dog, tried Hugh experimentally. The animal's ears lifted slightly. It glanced at him, keeping one eye fixed on the midshipman, but letting Hugh know it considered him a friend. Here, dog, ordered Hugh, clumsily snapping his fingers. The dog turned his head, asking him if he was sure about this. Hugh snapped his fingers again, and the dog, with a parting snarl of the hapless elf, ambled over to Hugh, who patted it awkwardly. It sat down at his feet. It'll be all right, I'll watch him. Captain, the dragon is closing on us, reported a lookout. Dragon? Hugh looked at the elf. Captain Botharel, in answer, pointed. Hugh walked over to the ship's porthole and stared out. Threading its way through the firmament, the dragon was barely visible, appearing as a river of silver flowing among the flowbergs, a river of silver with 2 flaming red eyes. Do you know its type, human? A quicksilver. Hugh had to pause to think of the elven word. Cylindristani. We can't outrun it, said Captain Botharel. Look at its speed. It is well named. We'll have to fight. I don't think so, offered Hugh. My guess is we're about to meet the boy's father. Elves dislike and distrust dragons intensely. The elf wizard's magic cannot control them, and the knowledge that humans can has always throbbed like a rotting tooth in the elven mouth. The elves aboard the ship were nervous and ill at ease in the presence of the quicksilver dragon. It wound and writhed and twisted its long, shining body around their vessel. The elves shifted their heads constantly to keep the creature in view, or jumped in startlement whenever the head shot up in a place where it had not been 2 seconds earlier. Such nervous reactions appeared to amuse the Mysteriarch standing on the bridge. Though the wizard was graciousness itself, Hugh could see the glint beneath the lashless eyelids, and a small smile flickered occasionally across the thin and bloodless lips. "I am eternally in your debt, Captain Botherell," said Sinistrad. "My child means more to me than all the treasures of the High Realm." Looking down at the boy who was clinging to his hand and gazing up at him in unfeigned admiration, Sinistrad enlarged his smile. "I was glad to be of service. As the boy explained, we are now considered outlaws by our people. We must find and join the rebel forces. He promised us payment." "Oh, and you will receive it in abundance, I assure you. And you must see our enchanting realm and meet our people. We have so few guests. We become quite weary of each other. Not that we encourage visitors," Sinistrad added delicately, "but this is a special circumstance." Hugh glanced at Haplo, who had been brought to the bridge with the other guests upon Sinistrad's arrival. The assassin would have liked very much to get some indication of what Haplo thought of all this. They couldn't speak, of course, but even a raised eyebrow or a quick wink would tell Hugh that Haplo wasn't swallowing this honeyed fruit either. But Haplo was staring at Sinistrad so intently, the man might have been counting the pores in the wizard's long nose. "I will not risk flying my ship through that," Captain Botherell indicated the firmament with a nod of his head. "Give us what you have." The elf's gaze fixed on several fine jewels adorning the fingers of the Mysteriarch. "And we will return to our realm." Hugh could have told the elf he was wasting his breath. Sinistrad would never let this ship slip through his ruby and diamond sparkling hands. He didn't. "The journey might be the tiniest bit difficult, Captain, but not impossible and certainly not dangerous. I will be your guide and show you the safe passage through the firmament." He glanced around the bridge. "Surely you will not refuse to allow your crew the chance to view the wonders of our realm." The legendary wealth and splendor of the High Realm, made real by the sight of the jewels the wizard wore with such careless ease, kindled a flame that burned up fear and, so Hugh saw in the crew's eyes, common sense. He felt a cool pity for the elven captain, who knew he was flying into a spider web, but who could do nothing to stop himself. If he gave the order to leave this place and return home, he'd be the one returning the hard way, head over heels through several miles of empty sky. "Very well," Botherell said ungraciously. A cheer from the crew died out with the flash in the captain's eye. "May I ride with you on the dragon, Papa?" asked Bane. "Of course, my son." Sinistrad ran a hand through the boy's fair hair. "And now, much as I would enjoy staying and talking further with all of you, especially my new friend Limbeck here," Sinistrad bowed to the Geg, who bobbed awkwardly back. "My wife is waiting most impatiently to see her child. Women, what loving little creatures they are." Sinistrad turned to the captain. "I have never flown a ship, but it occurs to me that the major problem you will encounter passing through the firmament is ice forming on the wings. I am certain, however, that this most skilled colleague of mine," he bowed to the ship's wizard, who returned the courtesy respectfully, if guardedly, "can melt it." His arm around his son, Sinistrad started to leave, using his magic to transport him the short distance back to the dragon. Their bodies had faded to almost nothing when he paused and fixed a glittering-eyed gaze upon the captain. "Follow the path of the dragon," he said. "Exactly." And he was gone. "So what do you think of him?" Hugh asked Haplo in an undertone as both men, plus the dog, Alfred, and Limbeck, were escorted back to the brig. "The wizard? Who else?" "Oh, he's powerful," said Haplo, shrugging, "but not as powerful as I'd expected." Hugh grunted. He'd found Sinistrad daunting. "And what did you expect? A sartan?" Haplo glanced sharply at Hugh, saw it was a joke. "Yeah," he answered, grinning. Chapter 47, The Firmament. The Karfa Shon sailed through the ice floes, leaving a sparkling trail of crystals swirling and glittering in its wake. The cold was bitter. The ship's wizard had been forced to draw magical heat from the living and working areas of the ship and use it to keep the rigging, the cables, the wings, and the hull free of the ice that rained down on them with a rattling noise, sounding so, Limbeck said, like millions of dried peas. Haplo, Limbeck, Alfred, and Hugh huddled for warmth around the small brazier in the hold. The dog had curled up in a ball, its nose buried in its bushy tail, and was fast asleep. None of the four spoke. Limbeck was too awed by the sights he had seen and expected to see. What Haplo might be thinking was anybody's guess. Hugh was considering his options. Murder is out. No assassin worth his dagger takes on the job of killing a wizard, let alone a Mysteriarch. This Sinistrad is powerful. What am I saying? This man is power itself. He hums with it like a lightning rod in a thunderstorm. If only I could figure out why he wants me now, when he tried to kill me once before. Why am I suddenly so valuable? Why did you make me bring Hugh, Father? The Quicksilver Dragon threaded its way through the ice floes. It was moving with unusual slowness, being held back by Sinistrad so that the elven ship could follow. The lethargic pace irritated the dragon, who, in addition, would have liked very much to dine on the sweet-smelling creatures inside the ship. But it knew better than to challenge Sinistrad. The two had waged numerous magical battles before, and Gorgon had always lost. It hated the wizard with a grudging respect. I may need Hugh the Hand, Bane. He is a pilot, after all. But we have a pilot, the elf captain. My dear child, you have much to learn. So begin learning it now. Never trust elves. Though their intelligence is equal to that of humans, they are longer-lived and tend to gain in wisdom. In ancient days, they were a noble race, and humans were, as the elves are wont to sneer, little more than animals compared to them. But the elf wizards could not leave well enough alone. They were, in fact, jealous of us. I saw the wizard take the dead elf's soul, interrupted Bane, hushed with remembered awe. Yes, Sinistrad sneered. That was how they thought to fight us. I don't understand, Father. It is important that you do, my son, and quickly. For we will be dealing with an elven ship's wizard. Let me describe to you briefly the nature of magic. Before the Sundering, spiritual and physical magic, like all other elements in the world, was blended together in all people. After the Sundering, the world was split into its separate elements, at least so the legends of the Sartan tell us, and this happened with magic. Each race naturally seeks to use the power of magic to make up for its own deficiencies. Thus, elves, tending naturally toward the spiritual, needed magic to help enhance their physical powers. They studied the art of granting magical powers to physical objects that could work for them. Like the dragon ship? Yes, like the dragon ship. Humans, on the other hand, were better able to control the physical world, and so sought additional power through the spiritual. To communicate with animals, to force the wind to do our bidding, the stones to rise up at our command, this became our greatest talent. And because of our concern with the spiritual, we developed the ability of mental magic, of training our minds to alter and control physical laws. That's why I could fly. Yes. And if you had been an elf, you would have lost your life, for they do not possess such power. The elves poured all of their arcane skill into physical objects and studied the art of mental manipulation. An elven wizard with his hands bound is helpless. A human wizard, under the same circumstances, need simply tell himself that his wrists are shrinking in size, and it will be true. Thus, he can slip out of his bonds. Father, said Bane, looking backward, the ship's stopped. So it has. Sinistrad checked an impatient sigh and reined in the dragon. That ship's wizard of theirs must be nothing more than second house if he can't keep the ice off their wings any better than this. And so we have two pilots. Bane twisted around in the dragon's saddle in order to get a better look at the ship. The elves had been forced to take axes to the ice that had formed on the cables. Not for long, said Sinistrad. If he's going to use this vessel, the wizard needs a pilot. This question settled, Hugh took out his pipe and began to fill it sparingly with his dwindling supply of tobacco. And now the wizard has two pilots, me and the elf. He can keep us both guessing, play us one off the other. Winner lives, loser dies. Or maybe not. Maybe he won't trust the elf at all. Interesting. I wonder if I should tip off Botharel. Lighting his pipe, Hugh gazed at the others from beneath hooded lids. Limbeck. Why Limbeck? And Haplo, where does he fit in? The gag you brought, my son. You say he's the leader of his people? Well, sort of. Bane squirmed uncomfortably. It wasn't my fault. I tried to get their king. They call him the head foreman. High Froman. But that other man wanted this Limbeck to come and... The boy shrugged. He came. What other man? Sinistrad asked. Alfred? No, not Alfred, Bane said scornfully. The other man, the quiet one, the one with the dog. Sinistrad cast his mind around the bridge of the ship. He did recall seeing some other human, but couldn't bring his face to memory. Nondescript, a kind of gray blur. That must be the one from the newly discovered realm. Perhaps you should have cast the enchantment over him, convinced him that he wanted what you wanted. Didn't you try? Of course, Father, Bane said, his cheeks flushed with indignation. Then what happened? Bane ducked his head. It didn't work. What? Could it be possible that Tryon actually managed to disrupt the spell? Or perhaps this man has a charm. No, he doesn't have anything except a dog. I don't like him. He came along and I didn't want him to, but I couldn't stop him. When the enchantment went out to him, it didn't work like it does on most people. Everyone else sort of absorbs it, like a sponge sucking up water. With him, that Haplo, it just bounced right back. Impossible. He must have a hidden charm, or else it was your imagination. No, it wasn't either of those, Father. Bah, what do you know? You're just a child. This Limbeck is the leader of some sort of rebellion among the people, isn't that right? Bane, head down, pouted, refused to answer. Sinistrad brought the dragon to a halt. The ship was lumbering along behind, its wings brushing the edges of flowbergs that could smash its hull into fragments. Twisting in the saddle, the Mysteriarch caught hold of his son's jaw with his hand and jerked the boy's face upward. His grip was painful, Bane's eyes filled with tears. You will answer promptly any question I put to you. You will do my bidding without argument or backtalk. You will at all times treat me with respect. I do not blame you for your lack of it now. You have been around those who did nothing to command it, who were not worthy of it, but that has changed. You are with your father now. Never forget that. No, whispered Bane. No, what? The grip tightened. No, Father, Bane gasped. Satisfied, Sinistrad released the boy, rewarding Bane with a slight widening of the thin, bloodless lips. He turned back to face forward, ordering the dragon on. The wizard's fingers left white indentations on the boy's cheek, purplish marks on his jaw. Thoughtful, Bane was silent, trying to rub away the pain with his hand. His tears had not fallen, and he blinked them back from his eyes, swallowed those in his throat. Now, answer my question. This Limbeck is leader of a rebellion. Yes, Father. And so he could be useful to us. At the very least, he will provide information about the machine. I made drawings of the machine, Father. Did you? Sinistrad glanced behind him. Good ones? No, don't take them out. They might blow away. I will look them over when we reach home. Hugh puffed slowly on his pipe, feeling more relaxed. Whatever the wizard was plotting, Limbeck would provide him information and access to the low realm. But Haplo? Try to figure that one. Unless he just came along by accident. No. Hugh gazed at the man intently. Haplo was teasing the sleeping dog, tickling its nose with its tail. The dog sneezed, woke up, looked around irritably for the fly, and, not finding it, went back to sleep. Hugh thought back to their imprisonment on Drevlin, to the riveting shock he'd experienced seeing Haplo standing beside the grill. No, Hugh couldn't imagine Haplo doing anything by accident. This was by design, then, but by whose? Hugh's gaze shifted to Alfred. The Chamberlain was staring into nothing, his face the face of one who walks in a waking nightmare. What had happened to him in the low realm, and why was he here, other than that the kid wanted to bring along his servant? But Bane hadn't brought Alfred, Hugh remembered. The Chamberlain had tagged along of his own accord, and was still tagging. And what about Alfred? Sinistrad asked. Why did you bring him? The Mysteriarch and his son were nearing the edge of the firmament. The bergs were becoming smaller, and the distances between them farther apart. Ahead of them, sparkling in the distance, shining through the ice like an emerald set amidst diamonds, was what Sinistrad said was the High Realm. In the distance, behind them, they could hear a ragged cheer lift from the elven ship. He found out about King Stephen's plan to have me murdered, Bane answered his father, and he came along to protect me. He doesn't know more than that. He knows I'm your son. He knows about the enchantment. All the fools know about it. That's what made it so effective. They were so delightfully aware of their own helplessness. But that wasn't what I meant. Does Alfred know you manipulated your parents and that idiot Tryon into thinking that they were the ones responsible for casting you out? Is that why he came? No. Alfred came because he can't help himself. He has to be with me. He's not smart enough to do anything else. It will be handy to have him with you when you return. He can verify your story. Return? Return where? Bane looked frightened. He clung to his father. I'm going to stay with you. Why don't you rest now? We'll be home soon, and I want you to make a good impression on my friends. And on Mother? Bane settled himself more comfortably in the saddle. Yes, of course. Now hold your tongue. We are nearing the dome, and I must communicate with those waiting to receive us. Bane rested his head against his father's back. He hadn't told quite all the truth about Alfred. There had been that strange occurrence in the forest when the tree fell on the boy. Alfred thought I was still unconscious, but I wasn't. I saw. Just what it was I saw, I'm not certain. Up here, I'm sure to find out. Perhaps someday I'll ask Father, but not now. Not until I learn what he meant about returning. Until then, I'll keep Alfred all to myself. Bane nestled closer to Sinistrad. Hugh dumped the tobacco out of his pipe and, wrapping it carefully in its cloth, placed it snugly against his breast. He'd known all along he was making a mistake coming up here. But he couldn't help himself. The kid had ensorcelled him. Hugh decided he could, therefore, quit thinking about his options. He didn't have any. Chapter 48. New Hope, High Realm. Guided by the Mysteriarch and the Quicksilver Dragon, the Carver Sean sailed through the magical dome surrounding the High Realm. Elves, humans, and the Geg pressed their faces against the portholes, staring out at the marvelous world below them. They were dazzled by the extraordinary beauty, awestruck by the magnificence of what they saw, and each reminded himself uneasily just how powerful were the beings who created these marvels. Within seconds, they had left behind the world of frozen, glittering ice and entered a sun-warmed green land with a shimmering rainbow-hued sky. The elves shed the fur coats they had donned to combat the frigid cold. Hugh dumped the charwood out of the brazier into the firebox. The ice began to melt from the ship, pouring off the hull, falling to the ground below them like rain. All hands not directly involved with the flying of the ship gazed in wide-eyed wonder at this enchanted realm. There must be water in abundance, was almost everyone's first thought. The ground was covered with lush vegetation. Tall trees with green leaves dotted a landscape of rolling hills. Here and there, tall pearl spires stood against the sky. Broad roads crisscrossed the valleys and vanished over the ridges. Sinistrad flew before them, the Quicksilver Dragon streaking like a comet across the sun-drenched sky, making the graceful dragon ship seem lumbering and clumsy by comparison. They followed his lead, and ahead of them on the horizon a cluster of spires appeared. Sinistrad aimed the dragon's head toward this location, and as the elven ship drew nearer, all on board saw it was a gigantic city. Hugh had once, during his days as a slave, visited the capital city of Aristagon, of which the elves were very justly proud. The beauty of its buildings, which are made of corallite molded into artistic shapes by skilled elven craftsmen, are legendary. But the jewels of Tribus were common paste and glass when compared to the wondrous city that lay glistening before them, a handful of pearls scattered over green velvet with an occasional ruby or sapphire or diamond set among them. A silence of profound awe, almost reverence, filled the elven ship. No one spoke, as if fearful of disturbing a lovely dream. Hugh had been taught by the Kier monks that beauty is ephemeral, and all man's work will come to naught but dust in the end. He'd seen nothing yet in his lifetime to convince him otherwise, but now he began to think maybe he'd been wrong. Tears ran down Limbeck's cheeks. He was constantly forced to remove his spectacles and wipe them off so that he could see. Alfred appeared to forget whatever inner torment he was suffering and gazed out on the city with a face softened by what one might almost call melancholy. As for Haplo, if he was impressed, he didn't show it, other than evincing a mild interest as he stared with the rest of them out the porthole. But then, Hugh thought, scrutinizing the man carefully, that face of his never shows anything. Fear, elation, worry, happiness, anger. And yet, if one looked carefully, there were traces, almost like scars, of emotions that had cut deep. The man's will alone had smoothed them out. Almost, but not quite, erased them. No wonder he makes me want to keep putting my hand to my sword. I think I'd almost prefer an avowed enemy at my side than Haplo as a friend. Sitting at Haplo's feet, gazing about with more interest than its master evinced, the dog suddenly ducked its head and gnawed at its flank, apparently driven to search out an elusive itch. The elven ship entered the city. It drifted low over wide, flower-lined boulevards that wound among tall buildings. What these buildings were made of was anyone's guess. Smooth and sleek, they seemed to be created out of pearls, those gems that are sometimes found among the corallite and are rare and precious as drops of water. The elves sucked in their breaths and glanced at each other out of the corners of their almond eyes. A cornerstone of pearl alone would give them more wealth than their king himself possessed. Hugh, rubbing his hands, felt his spirits lift. If he got out of here alive, his fortune was made. Dropping lower, they could see beneath the vessel upturned faces stare at them curiously as they passed. The streets were crowded. The city's population must number in the thousands, Hugh reckoned. Sinistrad guided the ship to a huge central park and indicated by hand signals that here they were to drop anchor. A crowd of wizards had gathered here, gazing at them curiously. Though none of the Magi had ever seen a mechanical contraption such as this, they were quick to catch hold of the guy ropes tossed over the side by the elves and fasten them to trees. Captain Botherell caused the ship's wings to fold in almost completely, so that only a small bit of magic kept the vessel afloat. Hugh and his companions were brought to the bridge and arrived there the same moment as Sinistrad and Bane appeared, seeming to step out of the air. The Mysteriarch bowed respectfully to the captain. "I trust your trip was not unduly difficult. Your ship sustained no damage from the ice? Little, thank you, replied Captain Botherell, bowing in turn. What damage we sustained, we will be able to repair. My people and I will be most happy to furnish you with material, wood, rope. Thank you, that will not be necessary. We are accustomed to making do with what we have. It was obvious that the beauty of this realm and all its wealth had not blinded Botherell's eyes. He was in alien lands among an enemy race. Hugh was growing to like this elf. There was, he could see, no need to warn Botherell of his danger. Sinistrad did not seem offended. Smiling a rictus smile, he said he hoped the crew would disembark and take in the pleasures of their city. Several of his people would come aboard and keep an eye on the slaves. Thank you. I myself and some of my officers may later be pleased to accept your invitation. As for now, we have work to do, and I would not want to burden you with responsibility for our slaves. Sinistrad, it seemed, might have raised an eyebrow had he had one. As it was, the lines in his forehead lifted slightly, but he said nothing, merely bowed again in acquiescence, the smile deepening and darkening. I could make this ship mine in 5 seconds if I wanted it, said the smile. Captain Botherell bowed, and he too smiled. Sinistrad's gaze slid over Hugh, Limbeck, and Alfred. It seemed they lingered for some time on Haplo, and the slight crease of a thoughtful frown appeared between the eyes. Haplo returned the inspection with his quiet, unassuming expression, and the frown line disappeared. You will have no objection, I hope, sir, to my taking these passengers of yours to meet my wife and to stay as guests in my house. We are most beholden to them for saving the life of our only child. Captain Botherell replied that he was certain his passengers would enjoy escaping the dull routine of shipboard life. Hugh, reading between the words, figured that the elf was glad to be rid of them. The hatch opened, a rope ladder was thrown out. Sinistrad and Bane left the bridge in their usual airy style. The others descended via the ladder. Hugh was the last one to leave the ship. Standing in the hatchway, watching the others slowly and clumsily make their way down, he was startled by a light touch on his arm. Turning, he looked into the eyes of the elf captain. Yes, said Botherell. I know what he wants. I'll do my best to make certain he doesn't get it. If you come back with money, we'll get you out of here. We'll wait for you as long as we can hold out. The elf's mouth twisted. I expect to be paid as promised, one way or the other. A cry and thud from below announced that Alfred, as usual, had come to grief. Hugh said nothing. There was nothing to say. All was understood. He began to climb down the ladder. The others were on the ground already, Haplo and Limbeck tending a prone and unconscious Alfred. Standing next to Haplo, licking Alfred's face, was the dog, and it occurred to Hugh to wonder as he descended how the animal or its master had managed such a remarkable feat. Hugh had never heard of a four-legged animal being able to climb down a rope ladder, but when he asked the others, no one seemed to have noticed. A group of 20 Mysteriacs, 10 men and 10 women, was on hand to welcome them. Sinistrad introduced them as Mystagogs, teachers of the arcane and the ruling body of the city. They appeared to be of varying ages, though none were as young as Sinistrad. One couple looked to be ancient, their faces wizened masses of wrinkles, nearly hiding eyes that were shrewd and intelligent, and held in them knowledge amassed over who knew how many years. The others were in midlife, with firm, unlined faces, hair thick and richly colored, with only a few strands of silver or gray at the temples. They were pleasant and polite, welcoming visitors to their fair city, offering all in their power to make the stay memorable. Memorable. Hugh had a feeling it would be that at least. Walking among the wizards, hearing introductions, he looked into eyes that never looked into his, saw faces that might have been carved of the pearl substance around them, devoid of any expression other than polite and proper welcome. His sense of danger and unease grew, and was made manifest by a peculiar incident. I was wondering, my friends, if you would care to walk about our city and view its wonders. My own dwelling is some distance away, and you may not have another opportunity to see much of New Hope before you have to leave. All agreed, and having ascertained that Alfred was not injured, beyond a bump on the head, they followed Sinistrad through the park. Crowds of wizards gathered on the grass or sat beneath the trees to stare at them as they passed, but no one said a word, either to them or to a neighbor. The silence was eerie, and Hugh felt that he much preferred the thumping and banging of the Kixie-Winsy. Reaching the sidewalk, he and his companions stood among the glittering buildings whose spires soared into the rainbow-shimmering sky. Arched doorways led to cool, shadowy courtyards. Arched windows gave glimpses of fabulous luxuries inside. These to your left belong to the College of the Arcane, where we teach our young. Across are the dwellings of the students and professors. The very tallest building that you can see from here is the seat of government, where sit the members of the council whom you have just met. I must warn you of one thing. Sinistrad, who had been walking with one hand resting lovingly on the shoulder of his son, turned around to face them. The material used in our buildings is made magically, and therefore is not, how shall I put it so that you will understand, let us say, it is not of this world. And so it would be a good idea if you, being of the world, did not touch it. What did I say? Limbeck, ever curious, had reached out his hand to run his fingers over the smooth, pearly stone. There was a sizzle, and the Geg yelped in pain and snatched back burned fingers. "He doesn't understand your language," said Alfred with a rebuking glance at the wizard. "Then I suggest that one of you translate," returned Sinistrad. "The next time it might cost him his life." Limbeck stared in awe at the buildings, sucking on the tips of his hurt fingers. Alfred imparted the warning to the Geg in a low voice, and they continued on down the street, new wonders continually unfolding before their eyes. The sidewalks were massed with people, coming and going on their business, and all staring at them curiously and in silence. Alfred and Limbeck kept pace with Bane and Sinistrad. Hugh was doing the same until he noticed Haplo lagging behind, walking slowly to assist his dog, which had suddenly developed a limp in one foot. Hugh, answering a silent request, paused to wait for them. They were a long time coming. The dog was in obvious discomfort, and the others drew well ahead. Haplo stopped and knelt down beside the animal, seemingly absorbed in its injury. Hugh joined him. "Well, what's the matter with the mutt?" "Nothing, really. I wanted to show you something." "Reach out and touch that wall behind me." "Are you crazy? You want to see me burn my fingers off?" "Go ahead," said Haplo with his quiet smile. The dog was grinning at Hugh as if sharing a wonderful secret. "You won't get hurt." Feeling very much like a boy who can't resist a dare, though he knows he'll only end up in trouble, Hugh gingerly stretched out his hand toward the pearl-glistening wall. He cringed in expected pain when his fingers touched the surface, but he felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. His fingers went completely through the stone. The building was solid as a cloud. "What the illusion?" said Haplo. He patted the dog on the flank. "Come on, the wizard's looking at us." "Thorn in its paw," he called out to Sinistrad. "I removed it. The dog will be all right now." Sinistrad regarded them with narrow-eyed suspicion, perhaps wondering where the dog had managed to pick up a thorn in the middle of the city. He continued on, however, though it seemed that his speech about the wonders of New Hope was a bit forced, the descriptions delivered somewhat bitingly. Hugh, mystified, nudged Haplo. "Why?" Haplo shrugged. "There's something else, too," he said in a low voice, the words coming out of the corner of his mouth so that if Sinistrad glanced back, they would not seem to be talking. "Take a close look at all these people around us. They're a quiet bunch, I can say that for them. Look at them closely." Hugh did as he was told. "There is something strange about them," he admitted. "They look..." He paused. "Familiar?" "Yeah, familiar. Like I've seen them somewhere before. But that's not possible." "Yes, it is. If you're seeing the same 20 people over and over." At that moment, almost as if he had overheard, Sinistrad brought the tour to an abrupt halt. "It is time we traveled on to my humble dwelling," he said. "My wife will be waiting." Chapter 49. Castle Sinister, High Realm. The Quicksilver Dragon carried them to Sinistrad's dwelling. They did not travel far. The castle seemed to float on a cloud and commanded, whenever the mists parted, a view of the city of New Hope that was spectacular, breathtaking, and, to Hugh's mind, disturbing. The buildings, the people, nothing but a dream. If so, whose? And why were they being invited, no, forced, to share it? Hugh's first action on entering the castle was to take a surreptitious poke at the wall. He noted Haplo doing the same, and both exchanged glances. The castle at least was solid. This was real. And the woman descending the stairs, was she real? "Ah, there you are, my dear. I thought you would be out front waiting impatiently to greet your son." The castle's entry hall was enormous, its dominating feature a grand staircase whose marble steps were so wide that a war dragon could have flown up it, wings fully extended, and never touched the sides. The interior walls were made of the same smooth, pearlized opal as the outer, and shimmered in the sunlight, shining softly through the shifting mists surrounding the castle. Tapestries of rich and wondrous beauty adorned the walls. Rare and valuable articles of furniture, massive wooden chests, richly carved high-backed chairs lined the hallway. Ancient suits of human armor made of precious metals, inlaid with silver and gold, stood silent guard. The stairs were covered with a thick, smooth carpet made of woven wool. Halfway down the stairs, dwarfed by their massive size, they could see, once Sinistrad had drawn their attention to her, a woman. She stood frozen, staring at her child. Bane kept very near Sinistrad, the boy's small hand clinging tightly to the wizard's. The woman put her hand to a locket she wore at her throat and clasped her fingers round it. With her other, she leaned heavily against the balustrades. She had not stopped on the stair to make a grand entrance, to draw all eyes to her. She had stopped, Hugh saw, because she could go no farther. Hugh had wondered briefly what kind of woman Bane's mother was. What kind of woman would participate in a baby's switching? He had thought he knew, and would not have been surprised to see someone as treacherous and ambitious as the father. Now, seeing her, he realized she was not a perpetrator, but a victim. "My dear, have you taken root?" Sinistrad appeared displeased. "Why don't you speak, our guests?" The woman was going to fall, and without pausing to think, Hugh ran upstairs and... "So that's Mother," said Bane. "Yes, my son," remarked Sinistrad. "Gentlemen, my wife, Iridal." He waved a negligent hand at her motionless body. "I must apologize for her. She is weak, very weak. And now, sirs, if you will follow me, I will show you to your quarters. I am certain you will want to rest after your fatiguing journey." "What about her, your wife?" Hugh demanded. He smelled the fragrance of crushed and faded lavender. "Take her to her room," said Sinistrad, glancing at her without interest. "It's at the top of the stairs along the balcony, second door to the left." "Should I call a servant to care for her?" "We have no servants. I find them disruptive. She must care for herself, as must you all, I'm afraid." Without looking to see if their guests were following, Sinistrad and Bane turned to the right and walked through a door that appeared, seemingly by the wizard's command, in a blank wall. The others did not immediately go after him. Haplo was idly looking around. Alfred was apparently torn between following his prince and attending to the poor woman in Hugh's arms. Limbeck looked with frightened round eyes at the door that had materialized out of solid rock and kept rubbing his ears, perhaps longing for a whoosh, zust, wham to break the oppressive silence. "I suggest you follow me, gentlemen. You will never find your way alone. There are but few fixed rooms in this castle. The rest come and go as we need them. I deplore waste, you see." The others, somewhat startled by this pronouncement, made their way through the door, Limbeck holding back until Alfred gently propelled him forward. Hugh wondered where the dog was, then, looking down, saw the animal at his feet. "Get along," Hugh snapped, shoving at the dog with a boot. The animal dodged him neatly and remained standing on the stair, watching him with interest, head cocked to one side, ears erect. The woman in Hugh's arms stirred faintly and moaned. No other assistance from his companions being forthcoming, the assassin turned and carried the woman up the stairs. The climb to the balcony above was long, but the burden he bore was light, far too light. He carried her to her room, finding it without difficulty by the half-open door and the faint smell of the same sweet fragrance that clung to her. Inside was a sitting room, beyond that a dressing room, and beyond that her bedchamber. Passing through the various rooms, Hugh was surprised to see that they were almost devoid of furnishings. There were few decorations, and those that were visible were covered with dust. The atmosphere of these inner private chambers was chill and barren, far different from the warm luxury of the entry hall. Hugh laid Iridal gently upon a bed covered with sheets of finest linen trimmed with lace. He drew a silken coverlet over her thin body and then stood gazing at her. She was younger than he had first guessed on seeing her. Her hair was white but thick and as finely spun as gossamer. The face in repose was sweet, delicately molded and unlined. Her skin was pale, so dreadfully pale. Before Hugh could catch the dog, it slipped past and gave the woman's hand, hanging down beside the bed, a swipe with its tongue. Iridal stirred and woke. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked up at Hugh, and fear contorted her features. "Go now," she whispered. "You must go." The sound of chanting greeted the sun in the chill morning. It was the song of black-robed monks descending on the village, driving away the other carrion birds. "Each new child's birth we die in our hearts. Truth, black, we are shown. Death always returns with. Hugh and other boys trudged behind, shivering in their thin clothing, their bare feet stumbling numbly over frozen ground. They had come to look forward to the warmth of the terrible fires that would soon be burning in this village. There were no living people to be seen, only the dead, lying in the streets where their relatives had tossed the plague-infested bodies, then gone into hiding against the coming of the Kyr. At a few doors, however, stood baskets of food, or perhaps, more precious, jugs of water, the village's payment for services rendered. The monks were accustomed to this. They went about their grim business, gathering the bodies, hauling them to the large open area where the orphans they sheltered were already heaping up char crystal. Other boys, Hugh among them, ran down the street, gathering up the thank offerings that would be carried back to the monastery. Coming to one doorway, he heard a sound and paused in the act of lifting a loaf of bread from a basket. He looked inside. "Mother," said a little boy, starting to approach a woman lying on the bed. "I'm hungry. Why don't you get out of bed? It's time for our breakfast." "I can't get up this morning, dear." The mother's voice, though gentle, apparently sounded strange and unfamiliar to the child because it frightened him. "No, my sweet darling, don't come near me. I forbid it." She drew a breath, and Hugh could hear it wheeze in her lungs. Her face was already as white as those of the corpses lying in the street, but he saw that once she had been pretty. "Let me look at you, Mikal. You will be good while I'm sick. Do you promise? Promise me," she said weakly. "Yes, Mother, I promise." "Go now," the woman said in a low voice. Her hands clenched the blankets. "You must go. Go. Fetch me some water." The child turned and ran toward Hugh, who was standing in the doorway. Hugh saw the woman's body jerk in agony, then go rigid, then limp. The eyes stared up at the ceiling. "I must get water from Mother," the child said, looking up at Hugh. His back was turned. He had not seen. "I'll help carry it," said Hugh. "You hold this." He handed the boy the bread. Might as well get the child accustomed to his new life. Taking the little boy by the hand, Hugh led him away from the house. In the child's arms was the loaf of bread baked by a woman just as she was probably beginning to feel the first symptoms of the disease that would shortly claim her. Behind him, Hugh could still hear the soft echo of the mother's command, sending her child away so that he would not see her die. "Go now." Water. Hugh lifted a carafe and poured a glass. Iridal did not glance at it, but kept her gaze fixed on him. "You." Her voice was low and soft. "You are one of them, with my son?" Hugh nodded. The woman rose, half sitting in bed, propped up on her arm. Her face was pale. There was a fever in her lustrous eyes. "Go," she repeated, speaking in a low, trembling voice. "You're in terrible danger. Leave this house now." Her eyes. Hugh was mesmerized by her eyes. They were large and deeply set, the irises every color of the rainbow, a glistening spectrum surrounding the black pupils that shifted and changed as the light struck them. "Do you hear me?" she demanded. Hugh hadn't really. Something about danger. "Here, drink this," he said, thrusting the glass toward her. Angrily, she knocked it aside. The goblet crashed to the floor, water running over the stone tiles. "Do you think I want your deaths too on my hands?" "Tell me the danger, then. Why must we leave?" But the woman sank back on the pillows and would not answer him. Drawing near, he saw that she was shivering with fear. "What danger?" He bent down to pick up the pieces of broken glass, looking at her as he worked. The woman shook her head frenziedly. Her eyes darted about the room. "No, I've said enough, perhaps too much. He has eyes everywhere. His ears are always listening." The fingers of her hands curled and closed in on the palms. It had been a long time since Hugh had felt another's pain. It had been a long time since he'd felt his own. From somewhere buried deep inside him, memories and feelings that had been lying dead came to life, stretched out bony hands and dug their nails into his soul. His hand jerked. A glass shard drove into his palm. The pain angered him. "What do I do with this mess?" Iridal made a weak gesture with her hand, and the broken glass he was holding in his hands vanished, as if it had never been. "I'm sorry you hurt yourself," she said in a dull, lifeless voice. "But that is what you must expect if you insist on staying." Averting his face from her, he turned to stare out the window. Far beneath them, its silvery skin visible through the shifting mists, the dragon had curled its huge body above the castle, and lay there murmuring to itself over and over of its hatred for the wizard. "We can't leave," Hugh said. "That dragon's out there guarding." "There are ways to avoid the Quicksilver if you truly want to leave." Hugh was silent, reluctant to tell her the truth, afraid of what he might hear in return. But he had to know. "I can't leave. I'm enthralled. Your son has me under enchantment." Iridal stirred fitfully, glanced up at him with pitying eyes. "The enchantment works only because you want it to work. Your will feeds it. You could have broken it long ago if you truly wanted. So the wizard Tryon discovered. You care about the boy, you see, and caring is an invisible prison. I know. The dog, which had stretched out, nose on paws, upon the floor at Hugh's feet, suddenly sat bolt upright and stared around fiercely. Iridal gasped. He's coming. Quickly, leave me now. You have been here too long. Hugh, his face dark and foreboding, did not move. Oh, please leave me, Iredell pleaded, stretching out her hands. For my sake, I am the one who will be punished. The dog was already on its feet and heading for the outer chambers. Hugh, with a final glance back at the stricken woman, thought it best to do as she said, for now at least, until he could mull over what she had told him. Going out, he met Sinistrad in the door to the sitting room. Your wife is resting. Hugh forestalled any question. Thank you. I am certain you made her very comfortable. Sinistrad's lashless eyes flicked over Hugh's muscular arms and body. A knowing smile touched his thin lips. Hugh flushed in anger. He started to push past the wizard, but Sinistrad moved slightly to block his way. You are hurt, said the Mysteriarch. Reaching out, he took hold of Hugh's hand and turned it palm up to the light. It's nothing, a broken glass, that's all. I cannot have my guests injured. Allow me. Sinistrad laid fingers thin and quivering like the legs of a spider on Hugh's palm over the wound. Closing his eyes, the Mysteriarch concentrated. The jagged cut closed. The pain of the wound eased. Smiling, Sinistrad opened his eyes and looked intently into Hugh's. We're not your guests, said the hand. We're your prisoners. That, my dear sir, replied the Mysteriarch, is entirely up to you. One of the few rooms of the castle to remain constantly in the castle was the wizard's study. Its location in relation to other rooms in the dwelling shifted constantly, depending upon Sinistrad's moods and needs. This day, it was in the upper part of the castle, the curtains drawn to catch the last light of Solaris before the Lords of Night snuffed day's candle. Spread out on the wizard's large desk were the drawings his son had done of the great Kixie-Winzy. Some were diagrams of parts of the huge machine that Bane personally had seen. Others had been created with Limbeck's help and provided illustrations of the parts of the Kixie-Winzy that operated on the rest of the Isle of Drevlin. The drawings were quite good and remarkably accurate. Sinistrad had instructed the boy on how to use magic to enhance his work. Picturing the image in his mind, Bane had only to connect that image with the motion of his hand to translate what he saw onto paper. The wizard was studying the diagrams intently when a muffled bark caused him to raise his head. What is that dog doing in here? He likes me, said Bane, throwing his arms around the dog's neck and hugging him. The two had been roughhousing on the floor, which tussle had occasioned the bark. He always follows me around. He likes me better than he does Haplo, don't you, boy? The dog grinned, its tail thumping the floor. Don't be too certain of that. Sinistrad fixed the animal with a piercing gaze. I don't trust it. I think we should get rid of it. In ancient times, Magi used animals such as this to do their bidding, to go places they could not go and act as spies. But Haplo isn't a wizard. He's just a human. And one not to be trusted. No man is that quiet and self-assured unless he thinks he has things under his control. Sinistrad glanced sidelong at his son. I don't like this exhibition of weakness I've discovered in you, Bane. You begin to remind me of your mother. The child removed his arms slowly from around the dog's neck. Rising to his feet, Bane walked over to stand beside his father. We could get rid of Haplo. Then I could keep the dog and you wouldn't have to be nervous about it. An interesting idea, my son, answered Sinistrad, preoccupied. Now take the beast out of here and run along and play. But, Papa, the dog's not hurting anything. He'll be quiet if I tell him to. See? He's just lying here. Sinistrad looked down to see the dog looking up. The animal had remarkably intelligent eyes. The Mysteriarch frowned. I don't want him in here. He smells. Run along, both of you. Sinistrad lifted one drawing, held it next to another, and regarded both thoughtfully. What was it originally designed to do? Something this gigantic, this enormous? What did the Sartan intend? Surely not just a means of gathering water. It produces the water to keep itself going, said Bane, clambering up on a stool to stand level with his father. It needs the steam to run the engines to create the electricity that runs the machine. The Sartan probably built this part of the machine, Bane pointed, to gather water and send it to the mid-realm. But it's obvious that this wasn't the machine's central function. You see, Bane caught his father's eye. The words died on the boy's lips. Sinistrad said nothing. Slowly, Bane slid down off the stool. The Mysteriarch, without another word, turned back to his perusing of the drawings. Bane walked to the door. The dog, rising to its feet, followed eagerly after, evidently thinking it was time to play. In the doorway, the boy halted and turned back. I know, he said. What? Sinistrad, irritated, glanced up. I know why the Kixie Whimsy was invented. I know what it was meant to do. I know how it can be made to do it. And I know how we can rule the entire world. I figured it out while I was making the drawings. Sinistrad stared at the child. There was something of the boy's mother in the sweet mouth and the features, but it was his own shrewd and calculating eyes that stared fearlessly back at him. Sinistrad indicated the drawings with a negligent wave of his hand. Show me. Bane, returning to the desk, did so. The dog, forgotten, plopped itself down at the wizard's feet. Chapter 50. Castle Sinister, High Realm. The tinkling of many unseen bells called Sinistrad's guests to dinner. The castle's dining room, no doubt having just been created, was windowless, large, dark, and chill. A long oaken table covered with dust stood in the center of the bleak chamber. Chairs draped in cloth ranged round it like guardian ghosts. The fireplace was cold and empty. The room had appeared right in front of the guests' noses, and they gathered within it, most of them ill at ease, to await the arrival of their host. Sauntering over to the table, Haplo ran his finger through an inch of dust and dirt. I can hardly wait, he remarked, to taste the food. Lights flared above them, hitherto unseen candelabrum flamed to brilliant life. The cloth draped over the chairs was whisked away by unseen hands, the dust varnished. The empty table was suddenly laden with food, roast meat, steaming vegetables, fragrant breads. Goblets filled with wine and water appeared. Music played softly from some unseen source. Limbeck, gaping, tumbled backward and nearly fell into a roaring fire blazing on the hearth. Alfred nearly leapt out of his skin. Hugh could not repress a start and backed away from the feast, eyeing it suspiciously. Haplo, smiling quietly, took a boer and bit into it. Footnote. Boer, a fruit of which humans are particularly fond. Its tart purple skin covers an almost sickeningly sweet pink meat inside. Those with educated palates believe nothing compares to the subtle blending of flavors when skin and meat are consumed simultaneously. The wine made from this fruit is much coveted by the elves, who, however, scorn eating the boer itself. End of footnote. Its crunch could be heard through the silence. He wiped the juice from his chin. A pretty good illusion, he thought. Everyone will be fooled until about an hour from now, when they'll begin to wonder why they're still hungry. Please, sit down, said Sinistrad, waving one hand. With the other he led in Irodal. Bane walked at his father's side. We do not stand on ceremony here, my dear. Leading his wife to the end of the table, he seated her in a chair with a bow. To reward Sir Hugh for his exertions in caring for you today, wife, I will place him at your right hand. Irodal flushed and kept her gaze on her plate. Hugh sat where he was told and did not appear displeased. The rest of you find chairs where you will, except for Limbeck. My dear sir, please forgive me. Switching to the Geg's language, the wizard made a graceful bow. I have been inconsiderate, forgetting that you do not speak the human tongue. My son has been telling me of your gallant struggle to free your people from oppression. Pray take a seat here near me and tell me about yourself. Do not worry about the other guests. My wife will entertain them. Sinistrad took his seat at the head of the table. Pleased, embarrassed, and flustered, Limbeck plunked his stout body into a chair at Sinistrad's right. Bane sat across from him on his father's left. Alfred hastened to secure a seat beside the prince. Haplo chose to seat himself at the opposite end of the long table, near Irodal and Hugh. The dog plopped down on the floor beside Bane. Taciturn and reticent as ever, Haplo could appear to be absorbed in his meal and could listen equally well to everyone's conversation. I hope you will forgive my indisposition this afternoon, said Irodal. Though she spoke to Hugh, her eyes kept sliding, as if compelled to do so, to her husband, seated opposite her at the table's far end. I am subject to such spells. They come over me at times. Sinistrad, watching her, nodded slightly. Irodal turned to Hugh and looked at him directly for the first time since he had taken his place beside her. She made an attempt at a smile. I hope you will ignore anything I said to you. The illness makes me talk about silly things. What you said wasn't silly, Hugh returned. You meant every word. And you weren't sick. You were scared as hell. There had been color in her cheeks when she entered. It drained as Hugh watched her. Glancing at her husband, Irodal swallowed and reached out her hand for her wine goblet. You must forget what I said. As you value your life, do not mention it again. My life is, right now, of very little value. Hugh's hand caught hold of hers beneath the table and held it fast. except as it can be used to serve you, Iridol. Try some of the bread, said Haplo, passing it to Hugh. It's delicious. Sinistrad recommends it. The Mysteriarch was indeed watching them closely. Reluctantly releasing Iridol's hand, Hugh took a piece of bread and set it down, untasted, on his plate. Iridol toyed with her food and pretended to eat. Then, for my sake, don't refer to my words, especially if you will not act on them. I couldn't leave knowing I left you behind in danger. You fool. Iridol straightened, warmth sweeping her face. What can you do, a human who lacks the gift, against such as we? I am 10 times more powerful than you, 10 times better capable of defending myself if need be. Remember that. Forgive me, then. Hugh's dark face flushed. It seemed you were in trouble. My troubles are my own, and none of your concern, sir. I will not bother you any more, madam. You may be certain of that. Iridol did not answer, but stared at the food on her plate. Hugh ate stolidly and said nothing. Things now silent at his end of the table, Haplo turned his attention to the opposite. The dog, lying by Bane's chair, kept its ears pricked, gazing up at everyone eagerly, as if hoping for a choice bit to fall its direction. But, Limbeck, you saw very little of the mid-realm, Sinistrad was saying. I saw enough. Limbeck blinked at him owlishly through his thick spectacles. The Geg had changed visibly during the past few weeks. The sights he had witnessed, the thoughts he had been thinking, had, like hammer and chisel, chipped away at his dreamy idealism. He had seen the life his people had been denied all these centuries, seen the life they were providing, all the while not sharing. The hammer's first blows hurt him. Later would come the rage. I saw enough, Limbeck repeated. Overwhelmed by the magic, the beauty, and his own emotions, he could think of nothing else to say. Indeed, you must have, answered the wizard. I am truly grieved for your people. All of us in the high realms share your sorrow and your very proper anger. I feel we must share in the blame. Not that we ever exploited you. We have no need, as you see around you, to exploit anyone. But still I feel that we are somewhat at fault. He sipped delicately at his wine. We left the world because we were sick of war, sick of watching people suffer and die in the name of greed and hatred. We spoke out against it and did what we could to stop it, but we were too few, too few. There were actually tears in the man's voice. Haplo could have told him he was wasting a fine performance, at least for his end of the table. Iridol had long since given up any pretense of eating. She had been sitting silently, staring at her plate, until it became obvious that her husband's attention was centered on his conversation with the Geg. Then she raised her eyes, but their gaze did not go to her husband or to the man seated beside her. She looked at her son, seeing Bane perhaps for the first time since he'd arrived. Tears filled her eyes. Swiftly she lowered her head. Lifting her hand to brush aside a stray lock of hair, she hastily wiped the drops from her cheeks. Hugh's hand, resting on the table opposite him, clenched in pain and anger. How had love's gilt-edged knife managed to penetrate a heart as tough as that one? Haplo didn't know, and he didn't care. All he knew was that it was damned inconvenient. The patron needed a man of action, since he was barred from action himself. It wouldn't do at all for Hugh to get himself killed in some foolish, noble, chivalric gesture. Haplo began to scratch his right hand, digging down beneath the bandages, displacing them slightly. The sigler exposed, he casually reached for more bread, managing, in the same movement, to press the back of his hand firmly against the wine pitcher. Grasping the bread in his right hand, he returned it to his plate, brushed his left hand over the bandages covering the right, and the runes were hidden once again. Iridol, Hugh began, I can't bear to see you suffer. Why should you care about me? I'm damned if I know. Hugh leaned near her. You or your son. More wine? Haplo held up the pitcher. Hugh glowered, annoyed, and decided to ignore his companion. Haplo poured a glassful and shoved it toward Hugh. The goblet's base struck the man's fingers, and wine, real wine, sloshed on his hand and his shirt sleeve. What the devil? Hugh turned on the patron angrily. Haplo raised an eyebrow, obliquely nodding his head in the direction of the opposite end of the table. Attracted by the commotion, everyone, including Sinistrad, was staring at them. Iridol sat straight and tall, her face pale and cold as the marble walls. Hugh lifted the goblet and drank deeply. From his dark expression, it might have been the wizard's blood. Haplo smiled. He hadn't been any too soon. He waved a hunk of bread at Sinistrad. Sorry, you were saying? Frowning, the Mysteriarch continued. I was saying that we should have realized what was happening to your people in the low realm and come to your aid. But we didn't know you were in trouble. We believed the stories that the Sartan had left behind. We did not know then that they were lying. A sharp clatter made them all start. Alfred had dropped his spoon onto his plate. "What do you mean? What stories?" Limbeck was asking eagerly. "After the Sundering, according to the Sartan, your people, being shorter in stature than humans and elves, were taken to the Low Realm for their own protection. Actually, as is now apparent, what the Sartan wanted was a source of cheap labor." "That's not true!" The voice was Alfred's. He hadn't spoken a word during the entire meal. Everyone, including Iridal, looked at him in astonishment. Sinistrad turned to him, his thin lips stretched in a polite smile. "No, and do you know what is the truth?" Red spread from Alfred's neck to his balding head. I've made a study of the Gegs, you see." Flustered, he tugged at and twisted the hem of the tablecloth. "Anyway, I think the Sartan intended to do what you said about protection. It wasn't so much that the Gegs were shorter and therefore in danger from the taller races, but that the Gegs were few in number. Following the Sundering, then the dwarf Gegs are very mechanically minded people, and the Sartan needed that for the machine. But they never meant, that is, they always meant to..." Hugh's head slumped forward and hit the table with a thud. Iridal sprang from her chair, crying out in alarm. Haplo was on his feet and moving. "It's nothing," he said, reaching Hugh's side. Slipping the assassin's flaccid arm around his neck, Haplo lifted the heavy body from the chair. Hugh's limp hand dragged at the cloth, knocked over goblets, and sent a plate crashing to the floor. "Good man, but a weak head for wine. I'll take him to his room. No need for the rest of you to be disturbed." "Are you certain he's all right?" Iridal hovered over them anxiously. "Perhaps I should come..." "A drunk has passed out at your table, my dear. There is hardly any need for concern," Sinistrad said. "Remove him by all means." "Can I keep the dog?" asked Bane, petting the animal, which, seeing its master preparing to leave, had jumped to its feet. "Sure," said Haplo easily. "Dog, stay." The dog settled happily back down at Bane's side. Haplo got Hugh to his feet. Weaving drunkenly, the man was just barely able to stagger, with help, toward the door. Everyone else resumed his seat. Alfred's words were forgotten. Sinistrad turned back to Limbeck. "This Kixie whimsy of yours fascinates me. I believe that since I now have a ship at my disposal, I will journey down to your realm and take a look at it. Of course, I will also be quite pleased to do what I can to help your people prepare for the war." "War?" The word echoed in the hall. Haplo, glancing back over his shoulder, saw Limbeck's face, troubled and pale. "My dear Geg, I didn't mean to shock you." Sinistrad smiled at him kindly. "War being the next logical step, I simply assumed that you would come here for this very purpose, to ask my support. I can assure you the Gegs will have the full cooperation of my people." Sinistrad's words came through the dog's ears to Haplo, who was carrying a stumbling Hugh into a dark and chill corridor. He was just wondering which direction the guest rooms were located from the dining room when a hallway materialized before him. Several doors stood invitingly open. "I hope no one walks in his sleep," Haplo muttered to his besotted companion. Back in the dining room, the patron could hear the rustle of Iridal's silken gown and her chair scrape against the stone floor. Her voice, when she spoke, was tight with controlled anger. "If you will excuse me, I will retire to my room now." "Not feeling well, are you, my dear?" "Thank you. I'm feeling fine." She paused, then added, "It is late. The boy should be in his bed." "Yes, wife, I'll see to it. No need to trouble yourself. Bane, bid your mother good night." Well, it had been an interesting evening. Fake food, fake words. Haplo eased Hugh onto his bed and covered him with a blanket. The assassin wouldn't wake from the spell until morning. Haplo retired to his own room. Entering, he shut the door and slid home the bolt. He needed time to rest and think undisturbed, assimilate all that he had heard today. Voices continued to come to him through the dog. Their words were unimportant. Everyone was parting to rest for the night. Lying down on his bed, the patron sent out a silent command to the animal, then began to sort out his thoughts. The Kixie whimsy. He deduced its function from the flickering images portrayed on the eyeball held in the hand of the Manger, the Sartan flouting their power, proudly announcing their grand design. Haplo could see the images again in his mind. He could see the drawing of the world, the realm of sky. He saw the isles and continents scattered about in disorder, the raging storm that was both death-dealing and life-giving, everything moving in the chaotic manner so abhorrent to the order-loving Sartan. When had they discovered their mistake? When had they found out that the world they created for the removal of a people after the Sundering was imperfect? After they had populated it, did they realize then that the beautiful floating islands in the sky were dry and barren and could not nurture the life that had been placed in their trust? The Sartan would fix it. They had fixed everything else, split apart a world rather than let those they considered unworthy rule it. The Sartan would build a machine that, combined with their magic, would align the isles and the continents. Closing his eyes, Haplo saw the pictures again clearly. A tremendous force beaming up from the Kixi-Winzi catches hold of the continents and the isles, drags them through the skies, and aligns them one right above the other. A geyser of water drawn from the constant storm shoots upward continually, bringing the life-giving substance to everyone. Haplo had figured out the puzzle. He was rather surprised that Bane had solved it as well. Now Sinistrad knew, and he had most obligingly explained his plans to his son and to the listening dog. One flick of the Kixi-Winzi's switch, and the Mysteriarch would rule a realigned world. The dog jumped up on the bed and settled itself at Haplo's side. Lazily relaxed to the point of sleep, the patron stretched out his arm and patted the dog on the flank. With a contented sigh, the animal rested its head on Haplo's chest and closed its eyes. What criminal folly, Haplo thought, stroking the dog's soft ears, to build something this powerful and then walk away and leave it to fall into the hands of some ambitious mensch. Footnote: mensch, a word used by both patrons and Sartan to refer to those less gifted with power than themselves. It is applied equally to elves, humans, and dwarves. End of footnote. Haplo couldn't imagine why they had done it. For all their faults, the Sartan weren't fools. Something had happened to them before they could finish their project. He wished he knew what. This was the clearest sign he could imagine, however, to prove that the Sartan were no longer in the world. An echo came to him, words spoken by Alfred during the confusion of Hugh's drunken swoon, words probably heard only by the dog and transferred dutifully to the master. They thought they were gods. They tried to do right. But somehow it all kept going wrong. Chapter 51, Castle Sinister, High Realm. Papa, I'm going with you to Drevlin. No, and stop arguing with me, Bane. You must return to the Mid-Realm and take your place on the throne. But I can't go back. Stephen wants to kill me. Don't be stupid, child. I haven't time for it. In order for you to inherit the throne, Stephen and his queen must be dead. That will be arranged. In essence, of course. I will be the one who is truly ruling the Mid-Realm, but I can't be in two places at once. I will be on the Low Realm preparing the machine. Don't snivel, I can't abide it. His father's words sounded over and over again in Bane's head like the screeching of some irritating nighttime insect that will not permit sleep. I will be the one who is truly ruling the Mid-Realm. Yes, and where would you be now, Papa, if I hadn't shown you how? Lying on his back, stiff and rigid in the bed, the boy clutched handfuls of the fleecy blanket that covered him. Bane didn't cry. Tears were a valuable weapon in his fight against adults. He had often found them useful against Stephen and Anne. Tears alone in the darkness were a weakness, so his father would think. But what did he care what his father thought? Bane gripped the blanket hard, and the tears almost came anyway. Yes, he cared. He cared so much it hurt him inside. Bane could remember clearly the day he had come to realize that the people he knew as his parents only adored him. They didn't love him. Having escaped from Alfred, he was loitering about the kitchen, teasing the cook for bites of sweet dough, when one of the stable boys ran in, wailing over a scratch from a dragon's claw. It was the cook's son, a lad not much older than Bane, who'd been put to work with his father, one of the dragon tenders. The cut wasn't serious. Cook cleaned it and bound it with a strip of cloth. Then, taking the child in her arms, kissed him heartily, hugged him, and sent him back to his chores. The boy ran off with a glowing face, the pain and fright of his injury quite forgotten. Bane had been watching from a corner. Just the day before, he'd cut his hand on a chipped goblet. There'd been a flurry of excitement. Tryon had been summoned. He'd brought with him a solid silver knife passed through flame, healing herbs, and cobweb to staunch the bleeding. The offending goblet had been smashed. Alfred had come near being sacked over the incident. King Stephen shouted at the poor chamberlain for 20 minutes running. Queen Anne had nearly fainted at the sight and been forced to leave the room. His mother had not kissed him. She had not taken him into her arms and made him laugh to forget the pain. Bane had derived a certain satisfaction from beating up the stable boy, a satisfaction compounded by the fact that the stable boy had been severely punished for fighting with the prince. That night, Bane asked the voice of the feather amulet, the soft and whispering voice that often spoke to him during the night, to explain why his parents didn't love him. The voice told him the truth. Stephen and Anne weren't his real parents. Bane was just using them for a while. His true father was a powerful mysteriarch. His true father dwelt in a splendid castle in a fabulous realm. His true father was proud of his son, and the day would come when he would call his son home, and they would be together always. The last part of the sentence was Bane's addition, not "I will be the one who is truly ruling the mid-realm." Letting go of the blanket, the boy grasped hold of the feather amulet he wore around his neck and jerked hard on the leather thong. It would not break. Angrily, using words he'd picked up from the stable boy, Bane pulled at it again, harder, and succeeded only in hurting himself. Tears came to his eyes at last, tears of pain and frustration. Sitting up in bed, he pulled and tugged, and finally, after costing himself more pain by getting the thong tangled in his hair, managed to drag it up over and off his head. Alfred was passing down the hallway, searching for his own bedchamber in the confusing, forbidding palace. Limbeck is falling under the sway of the mysteriarch. I can see the bloody conflict into which the gigs will be drawn. Thousands will die, and for what? To gain an evil man control of the world. I should stop it, but how? What can I do alone? Or maybe I shouldn't stop it. After all, I was attempting to control what should have been left alone that brought tragedy on us all. And then there is Haplo. I know for certain who he is. But again, what can I do? Should I do anything? I don't know. Why was I left by myself? Is it a mistake? Or am I supposed to be doing something? And if so, what? End of side 9. To continue, turn the cassette over. The Chamberlain, in his aimless ramblings, found himself near Bane's door. His inner turmoil made the dark and shadowy hall swim before his eyes. Pausing until his vision cleared, wishing desperately his thoughts would do the same, Alfred heard the rustle of bedclothes and the child's voice crying and cursing. Glancing up and down the hall to make certain he was not seen, Alfred raised 2 fingers on his right hand and traced the sign of a sigil on the door. The wood seemed to disappear at his command, and he could see through it as if it were not there. Bane hurled the amulet into a corner of the room. No one loves me, and I'm glad of it. I don't love them. I hate them, all of them. The boy flung himself down onto the bed, buried his head in the pillow. Alfred drew a deep and shaking breath. At last. It had happened at last, and just when his heart was despairing. Now was the time to draw the boy back from the edge of Sinistrad's pit. Alfred stepped forward, forgetting the door, and narrowly missed bumping right into it, for the spell he had cast had not removed it, merely let him see through it. The Chamberlain caught himself and, at the same time, thought, no, not me. What am I, a servant, nothing more? His mother. Yes, his mother. Bane heard a sound in his room and promptly shut his eyes and froze. He had the blanket pulled over his head, and he hastily dried his tears with a quick flick of his hand. Was it Sinistrad coming to say he'd changed his mind? Bane? The voice was soft and gentle, his mother's. The boy pretended to be sleeping. What does she want? He wondered. Do I want to talk to her? Yes, he decided, hearing once again his father's words, I think I do want to speak to Mother. All my life, people have used me to get what they wanted. Now I'm going to start using them. Blinking sleepily, Bane raised a tousled head from the depth of the blankets. Iridol had materialized inside his room and was standing at the foot of his bed. Light slowly began to illuminate her, shining from within and casting a warm and lovely radiance over the boy. The rest of the room remained in darkness. Looking at his mother, Bane knew from the pitying expression that swept over her face that she saw he had been crying. This was good. Once again he drew on his arsenal. Oh, my child. His mother came to him. Sitting down on the bed, Iridol slid her arm around him and drew him close, soothing him with her hand. A feeling of exquisite warmth enveloped the boy. Nestling into that comforting arm, he said to himself, I've given Father what he wants. Now it's her turn. What does she want of me? Nothing, apparently. Iridol wept over him and murmured incoherently about how much she had missed him and how she had longed for him to be with her. This gave the boy an idea. Mother, he said, looking up at her with tear-drenched blue eyes, I want to be with you, but Father says he's going to send me away. Send you away? Where? Why? Back to the mid-realm. Back to those people who don't love me. He caught hold of her hand and hugged it tightly. I want to stay with you, you and Father. Yes, Iridol murmured. Drawing Bane close, she kissed him on the forehead. Yes, a family, like I've always dreamed. Maybe there is a chance. Maybe I can't save him, but his own child. Surely he could not betray such innocent love and trust. This hand. She kissed the child's fingers, bathing them with tears. This hand might lead him away from the dark path he walks. Bane didn't understand. All paths were one to him, neither dark nor light, all leading straight to the same goal, people doing what he wanted them to do. "You'll talk to Father," he said, squirming out of her grasp, feeling that after all, kissing and hugging might get to be a nuisance. "Yes, I'll talk to him tomorrow." "Thank you, Mama." Bane yawned. "You should be sleeping," Iridol said, rising. "Good night, my son." She gently drew the blanket up snug around him and, leaning down, kissed his cheek. "Good night." The magical radiance began to fade from her face. She raised her hands and closed her eyes, concentrating, and disappeared from his room. Bane grinned into the darkness. He had no idea what kind of influence his mother might be able to exert. He could only judge by Queen Anne, who had generally been able to get what she wanted from Stephen. But if this didn't work, there was always the other plan. In order to make that plan work, he would have to give away for free something he guessed was of inestimable value. He would be circumspect, of course, but his father was smart. Sinistrad might guess and rob him of it. Still, spend nothing, gain nothing. Likely he wouldn't have to give it up. Not yet. He wouldn't be sent away. Mama would see to that. Gleefully, Bane kicked off the smothering covers. Chapter 52, Castle Sinister, High Realm. The following morning, Iridol entered her husband's study. She found her son there with Sinistrad, the two of them seated at her husband's writing desk, poring over drawings made by Bane. The dog, lying at her son's feet, lifted its head when it saw her, its tail thumping the floor. Iridol paused a moment in the doorway. All her fantasies had come true. Loving father, adoring son. Sinistrad patiently devoting his time to Bane, studying whatever the boy had done with an assumed gravity that was quite endearing. In that instant, seeing the skull-capped head bent so near the fair-haired one, hearing the murmur of the voices, one young and one old, caught up in the excitement of what she could only think was some childish project of her son's, Iridol forgave Sinistrad everything. Her years of terror and suffering she would gladly erase, banish from her memory, if only he would grant her this. Stepping forward almost shyly, it had been many years since she had set foot in her husband's sanctum. Iridol tried to speak but couldn't find her voice. The choked sound caught the attention of both son and father, however. One looked up at her with a radiant, charming smile. The other appeared annoyed. "Well, wife, what do you want?" Iridol's fantasies wavered, their bright mist shredded by the chill voice and the icy gaze of the lashless eyes. "Good morning, Mama," said Bane. "Would you like to see my drawings? I made them myself." "If I am not disturbing..." She looked hesitantly at Sinistrad. "Come in, then," he said ungraciously. "Why, Bane, these are marvelous." Iridol lifted a few pages and turned them to the light of the sun. "I used my magic, like Father taught me. I thought of what I wanted to draw, and my hands took over and did it. I learned magic very quickly," said the boy, gazing up at his mother with wide-eyed charm. "You and Father could teach me in your spare time. I wouldn't be any trouble." Sinistrad sat back in his chair, the robes of heavy watered silk rustling dryly like bat wings. His lips creased in a chill smile that blew the tattered remnants of Iridol's fancies from the skies. She would have fled to her chambers had not Bane been watching her hopefully, silently pleading with her to continue. The dog laid its head back down between its paws, its eyes moving alertly to whoever spoke. "What are these drawings?" she faltered. "The great machine?" "Yes. Look, this is the part they call the Wombe. Papa says that means womb, and it's where the Kixie-Winsy was born. And this part activates the great force that will pull all of the isles..." "That will do, Bane," interrupted Sinistrad. "We mustn't keep your mother from the entertaining of our guests." He lingered over the word. The look he gave her made her skin flush crimson and scattered her thoughts in confusion. "I assume you came here for some purpose, wife? Or perhaps it was just to make certain that my time was occupied so that you and the dark and handsome assassin..." "How dare... What did you say?" Iridol's hands began to shake. Hurriedly, she laid the pages of drawings she'd been holding back on the desk. "Didn't you know, my dear? One of your guests is a professional knife man. Hugh the Hand is what he calls himself. A hand stained in blood, if you will forgive my small jest. Your gallant champion was hired to murder a child." Sinistrad ruffled Bane's hair. "But for me, wife, your boy would never have come home to you. I thwarted Hugh's design." "I don't believe you. It's not possible." I know it's shocking for you, my dear, to discover that we have a house guest who might murder us all in our beds. But I've taken every precaution. He did me a favor by drinking himself into a blind stupor last night. It was quite simple to transfer his wine-soaked body to a place of safekeeping. My son tells me that there is a price on the man's head, as well as that of the boy's treacherous servant. The amount will be just enough to finance my project in the low realm. And now, my dear, what was it you wanted? Don't take my son from me, Iridal gasped for breath, feeling as if cold water had been dashed over her. Do whatever you want. I will not stop you. Just leave me my son. Only the other morning you disclaimed him. Now you say you want him. Sinistrad shrugged. Really, madam, I can't subject the boy to your idle whims that change daily. He must return to the mid-realm and take up his duties. Now I think you had better go. So nice that we could have this little chat, wife. We must do it more often. I do think, Mama, that you might have talked this over with me first, interjected Bane. I want to go back. I'm certain Father knows what's best for me. I'm certain he does, said Iridal. Turning, she walked with quiet dignity out of the study and managed to make it down the chill, shadowy hallway before she wept for her lost child. As for you, Bane, said Sinistrad, returning each of the drawings Iridal had disturbed to its proper place,